Hello, 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 and welcome to yet another episode of WhickTV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. 𝕾𝖍𝖎, thank you for the raid. 37 people. Love you. Love to see you.
Hey.
Have a seat. Kick your feet up. We're going to get down to brass tacks here in a moment. Today, we are going to be discussing Zionism. We are also going to be discussing anti-Semitism and the world's reaction to October 7th, and from the perspective and from the lens of Jewish voices. There have been a lot of talk about, from the Western perspective, right, from the Palestinian perspective, but I wanted to give a chance for people who have been affected by this in the Jewish sense, right? How has their lives changed since October 7th? How has their perspectives on life changed since October 7th? So I wanted to get Jewish voices from across the political spectrum, across the world, right? We have people from Israel here tonight, and we have people from all over the world, right? And we're just going to talk about it, discuss it, and yeah, we'll see what goes down. But I wanted to give each of these individuals a chance to introduce themselves, tell a little bit about who they are, right? And maybe why this topic's important to them. And then we'll get into the meat of the discussion. Sound good, gang? Cool, cool. Let's begin. Go. We're going to let you go first. Tell people who you are, what you do, etc.
Okay, basically, I study physics, at the university, and well, I don't know how this subject hit me. Okay, it's just pretty random, but I'm very invested in in fighting misinformation online and also trying to help other people with things that they need, with whether it's food, whether it's like clothes, helping soldiers that are in close to Gaza and stuff like that. Well, basically doing lots of voluntary work.
Okay.
So it's making up for a huge hole that the war left in me, I guess.
Okay. We'll talk about it as we go. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you.
Oh, and my
Jace.
name is Izzy. I'm not sure I said that.
Oh, well, nice to meet you, Izzy. Jason or something. What you got?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so you can, I guess, you just call me Jason. I'm a Orthodox Jewish guy. I grew up in America, and since the war began, I've felt more of a personal obligation than kind of ever to make my voice heard, to make the voice of religious Jews heard, not just Jews in general, although Jews in general, absolutely, I think everybody kind of needs to have a voice. And so that's kind of what brought me here. Um, I'm gonna probably talk, unless otherwise stated, the perspectives that I might give about Judaism or Zionism or what have you. Will be from that perspective. But I am going to try to at least be kind of inclusive, when I can be to other types of Jews as well.
Sure. We brought you on to talk about your thoughts and your perspectives as well. So don't
Sure.
feel like you have to include everyone. Speak what you think, right? And so I appreciate you being here. Thank you. We'll get into it as we go. Mono, go ahead.
Hey, my name is Monokuro or Mono. I'm an Israeli citizen and VTuber, and yeah, the reason I'm here is because I think there should be more Israeli and Jewish voices around right now, especially like Israeli voices, and I'm so happy that this panel is happening because of that. So thank you, Wick, for hosting it, and thanks everyone for coming.
Of course.
Really happy about that.
Well, the VTuber aside, we're glad you're here. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
just
you.
forget about that part. You never heard it. It's just
Yeah.
yeah.
Quibbles, go ahead.
So I'm 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙. So I grew up Reform Jewish. My sister's actually training to be a Reform rabbi, which is interesting and complicated in and of itself, because there's sort of a component of Judaism that doesn't think that women can be rabbis, and there's a component of Judaism that wouldn't even consider me to be Jewish, in that I was my mother was not born Jewish. She has since converted to Reform Judaism, but did so after I had my bar mitzvah. So Judaism has always been complicated for me. I'm a progressive, basically across the board, including, I would say, on this issue. Although I think that a lot of people have construed progressivism as being anti-Zionist in a way that I think is uncomfortable to me. So I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll definitely. I want to hear what everyone thinks about Zionism too as we go. But again, we'll get into it after introductions. Silver, go ahead. You there, buddy? Is he frozen?
I think he might be.
Oh, he does look
Yeah.
frozen.
He's very stoic in
Yeah,
that look.
true. He's
Yeah.
super stoic. Okay, we're gonna pass him for now and go to Stactiums. Go ahead.
Hi, Staxiums. I make videos on TikTok from a progressive lens. YouTube videos as well. Follow me all of those places. But so I don't know. It's always kind of been a hard conversation. I've generally been pretty pro-Palestine, but I think I was shocked, especially during October 7th and right afterward, like the huge amount of people who were so pro-Hamas really took me for a leap. And I just wasn't expecting that. I don't know if I have much to say. I'm sure I'll have a bunch of things to say during the conversation.
Well, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Silver, are you back with us?
Yeah, I'm back. I don't know what that was.
Okay,
Anyway, I'm Silver in Hand. I don't stream. I don't make any content or anything like that. In fact, the main reason I'm doing more of these things now is because October 7th is the impetus that like is driving me to like I feel like I can't be there. I can't participate in what's going on an ocean away, but at least I can talk and speak to all these different people, get different perspectives, and hopefully I can like stop all the hate that's like just coming our way because it's become too much. I'm a parent, so I'm constantly thinking about like what is my son going to be growing, what kind of world is he going to be growing up in. I don't want him to go through any of the bullshit that I went through. I'm a secular East Coast Jew, so you might hear some cussing. Other than that, I'm just eager to get into this and hear all the different stories and all the different perspectives.
Awesome. Thank you for being
It's
here.
okay as long as you cuss in Hebrew.
Okay,
I
and
didn't
last,
know there was an association between cussing and being an East Coast Jew.
we'll get into it
Or a
in the panel,
secular
I'm
Jew.
sure. We'll get into the panel, but I wanted to give some space for our last.
Well, not
guest.
not so much that, but
Yeah, again, we'll get into it. I promise you. But I want to give some space to our last guest. A bit of a last minute addition, so I appreciate him coming on last minute. But I think his voice is also very important. Rafi, go ahead.
Hi, so I'm Rafi. I used to be in the military here in Israel for a decade, and for me, the big impetus that has brought me to be talking about this and trying to spread awareness is that I think that the misinformation and honestly the lies that are discussed in relation to Jews, in relation to Israel, in relation to this conflict, themselves perpetuate the conflict, and that I hate the dichotomy of pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian, but to be pro-peace, pro-future, there has to be an honest accounting of what's going on. There has to be an honest accounting of how we treat both sides that are involved in this conflict, and the lies and like this total disconnect from reality that exists online and in the West when discussing Israel. It just needs to be addressed if we ever want to see a future where our kids aren't killing each other.
Oh, and that's a strong statement. And with that, I guess I have my first question, right? What is the we hear a lot about Zionism and people being not anti-Jewish but anti-Zionist. So I guess I just asked, like, when we talk about Zionism, first of all, how many people here consider themselves Zionists? Raise your hand.
Can't raise my hand, but
Rafi, well. Okay, so about 4. VTuber, I don't know if you're raising your hand or not.
Not really, I guess.
Okay,
sure.
So fair enough. About half the panel, a little more than half. What is Zionism, right, to you? Like, why do you consider yourself a Zionist? And I guess I'll start with Quibbles. Quibbles, why are you a Zionist? What does being a Zionist mean?
When I think about Zionism, I think about just a basic principle that in the aftermath of the Holocaust and in the aftermath of being forced out of the totality of the Middle East, being forced out of Ethiopia, that there's a real need for a place for Jews to be safe and to be home, and that specifically that should happen in the place which was the birthplace of Judaism, a place that we had been ethnically cleansed from prior multiple times. And I think that basic belief doesn't require that you have any stance in relationship to Palestinian rights, which I also support, or any stance in relationship to the specific lines of where on a map that should be, but that broadly there should be some place for Jews in what was once Judea, Samaria, or Israel.
Interesting. So you wouldn't be against a Palestinian state, at least
No,
on
I wouldn't.
principle?
No,
Okay.
at least in principle, no.
Yeah, fair enough. Goat, what about you? Why are you a Zionist?
Well, basically, for the most part, it's just like being a patriotic, okay? Like just being proud of your own country, and but like it's just called Zionism, yes? Like if you're patriotic in Israel, you're a Zionist, okay? And yeah, and whatever Quibbles said about like the part where this is a safe haven for Jews all around the world, where nobody can like massacre them, like, or genocide them. Like you can always run here when there are pogroms around the world. So that's like also part of the Zionism. Well, a place for the Jews after the Holocaust is like really important. Yeah. So it's just like an effort to make like to have Holocaust not happen ever again. So yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Rafi, what do you think? Why are you a Zionist?
To build off of Quibbles, I mean, I think it's crucial to disambiguate Zionism from all of the different branches of Zionism. In the same way that, we have like anarcho-capitalist, or, capitalism can be expressed in many different ways. Communism can be expressed in many different ways. Zionism too. So when someone just says simply the word, I'm a Zionist, we shouldn't try to push them down some specific path of what we think that means. We have to disambiguate and see what the common thread is between all forms of Zionism. And I think Quibbles was precisely correct when he said that really the two things that we can look at Zionism, that define Zionism across all of its different commonly accepted iterations, are one, that Jews, just like any other nation, have a right to self-determination. We have a right to our own country. And we can go further into that and say that, as Goetz pointed out, that this really is drawn from our history of oppression and violence at the hands of other states and other peoples, and that it is necessary for us to have our own nation in order to protect ourselves. And the second aspect of this is that, yes, there is an inherent tie to the land. As an ethno-religion, Jews are inherently tied to the land of Israel. We have a connection that goes back thousands of years to this land. And in the same way that Palestinians have a right to live in this area, Jews also have a right to live here. And so when someone says, I'm a Zionist, the only things we should ascribe to them are that, one, they believe Jews have a right to self-determination, and two, they believe that Jews have a right to self-determination in the land of Israel. And that it says nothing about their stances on Palestinians. It says nothing on their stances about how the conflict should be resolved, but that it's simply a statement of support for self-determination.
Oh, that's powerfully put. And last but not least, Jason, you said you were a Zionist. Why? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, Rafi kind of took the words straight out of my mouth. So I mean, growing up, to me, it's, like Rafi said multiple times, and I also cannot emphasize this enough, right? That Zionism to me means the right to Jewish self-determination. That we are just as entitled to as any other ethnic group to a place of our own. That Zionism, right, that comes from the word Zion, that Jews are the nation of Israel. We're not I personally believe this is an ongoing debate. There's a debate whether is Judaism a religion or is it a nation, right? And if you're looking at it biblically, if you're looking at it in the context of the Old Testament, right, it is very much so a nation, right? We're the nation of Israel, B'nai Israel, the sons of Israel, right? So, from that perspective, what defines one of the core parts of what defines a nation is having a common ancestral homeland, right? And for Jews, at least I believe, that is, and you can quibble over no pun intended, you can quibble over the borders. The area that we know now as Israel. And so I personally don't view Zionism through the lens of or the historical lens of post-Holocaust, because I feel like that evokes certain criticisms of like, well, you're just kind of guilting everybody into giving you the land, right? Which it didn't start. Zionism did not, as a concept, did not start after after World War II. It started well before before the 1900s with Herzl. It's not a new concept, and it was kind of surprising to me in the last 10, 15 years or so, how quickly and how unexpectedly, at least from my perspective, Zionism became such a dirty word. It became such a loaded term that was kind of co-opted by other groups and kind of I think somebody kind of touched on it earlier, that it gained a lot of different meanings that I never certainly consented to. I don't view Zionism as exclusionary to Palestinians or people that were living in that land ethnically beforehand. But I also think that if you're going to claim that you have a right to live in that land because you were there before, that we do too. That's not really. I think that would be exclusionary towards Jewish people.
Well, let's talk about that. Actually, you bring up a good point, right? And I wanted to discuss that too. I'm also curious what, from the religious perspective, if Zionism has a special meaning to that. But we'll get into that. First, I want to tackle, and I want to include some of the people who haven't been included yet, right? About like why Zionism has taken on such a negative connotation, right? Why, right? As you said, in the past 15, I would say 20 years, being a Zionist has become, in many people's minds, almost like close to being a Nazi, right? Close to being a fascist or an authoritarian. And we see this all the time on social media and even in real life, right? When the protests, things like Zionists or genocidal maniacs that just want to, destroy Palestinians because they love to kill Palestinian babies. And I'm just curious, from your guys' perspective, why did it change? And I want to
settlements.
Oh, go ahead, Mono.
Successful propaganda.
Yeah, that too. But like, I think the settlements has given us like the illegal settlements.
Elaborate on that for me, Mono, please.
I think just like the way they treat Arab people, Palestinians. I've seen not too long ago a video of a settler just shooting a Palestinian, and the IDF is there and they do nothing because he legally owns the gun, and for some reason he can just do that there. So this is insane. This is evil, and when people see that, they can very easily, when they don't know enough and they just see this specific, like, I wouldn't even say he's Israeli, but they would consider him Israeli person just doing that, it can give a very bad name to an entire group of people.
You say you don't consider them Israeli. What do you mean?
I don't think these acts are enough to justify, to account for the level of.
I don't think we're justifying it.
I agree totally,
I think we're
but
just trying to explain
ignorant
it.
people have a tendency to just run with this
kind
of stuff.
Yeah, but
I think we're just trying to explain, like, hey, why the specific rise of anti-Zionism has occurred right here, and we should probably bring to the forefront of the conversation the really deep the mistreatment of Palestinians.
Yeah, I think it's an explanation.
Mass removal.
Well, let him finish. Let's let Staxian finish, and we'll go to Raffi, then Quibbles. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that there's some pretty fair concerns that you can have specifically for treatment of the Palestinians. Now, I'm not going to say that this is obviously a complicated conflict, and there's a lot of fingers that I could point in a lot of different directions. I'm not justifying the behavior or the rise of anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism. I'm just trying to explain it, which was the answer to the question. I think that there are fair events that you could point to and say this is very clearly the markings of disproportionate responses. I think that you can point to a lot of specific, like Netanyahu's settlements, the white phosphorus that happened recently, mass removal, the Nakba, a bunch of different places that you can point to. I'm not trying to justify anything, just trying to explain where exactly all of this pro-Palestinian sentiment is coming from.
To be honest, I don't think most of these people even know about half the things you mentioned.
Possibly.
I think we have to kind of
use the white colonial settlers.
Yeah, we have to separate kind of a few different things. Sorry, there was a lot that you just said, and I kind of want to go through it a little bit. But also, I'd first like to address the original question from Wick. Just that I think that when we're looking at why Zionism has become such a dirty word, we're kind of confusing the way that Palestinians might feel or the way that people might feel about the conflict with why Zionism as a word has become tarnished in this way. And I think that it has nothing to do with how Palestinians are treated and everything to do with the effort in a sense of propaganda. I don't mean propaganda dismissively, but in the literal sense, right, of advocating for your side. We have to acknowledge that war for centuries now has taken place not just in the context of two armed forces fighting each other, but also in the psychological operations that occur surrounding that to allow that war effort to be continued. War can only be continued while the population supports it, and very specifically in our case, war can only be continued while the international community allows it. So the fight over information and the fight over what is and cannot, what can and cannot be said, is, I would say, in some sense, even more important than the fight that goes on the ground between soldiers shooting each other. So I think that when we talk about how Zionism has become so dirty, I think that it has a lot of roots in efforts to malign Israel, to make it impossible verbally to express support for Israel without outing yourself in some sense as a bad person. And we see this broadly speaking because of the way that leftists
Arab
generally...
leaders do that too. Arab
Yes.
leaders
Yeah, I think
are
that
the
there's
ones that started the whole Israel is not gonna continue being here, and we're gonna do efforts for it, not like for Israel not to stay here. Yes, like they sorry, I
we
cut you
see
off.
this. It's okay, but no, but exactly what you're saying. But we see this also even in the way that words are redefined, just in the context of this conflict. When someone talks about a Palestinian refugee, they are expressing a concept, refugee, that is fundamentally different from any other conflict in the history of the world. When someone talks about a Palestinian refugee camp, they're discussing something that is fundamentally different from every other refugee camp that has ever existed in the world. So there has been a, I would say, very malicious effort across decades to warp the language in this conflict to make it impossible to express certain ideas in meaningful ways. So I think that would be my answer first to Wick's question. I want to really briefly, because I think it's very important that we don't spread fake information when we're discussing this. So very quickly, I just wanted to talk to Stacks. When you talk about the white phosphorus that was used, you have to, I'm not sure how familiar you are with military uses of phosphorus. There's two separate uses for white phosphorus, only one of which is a war crime. And that's the use of white phosphorus to burn populations, okay? By the way, we actually haven't signed that treaty, but I would still consider it a war crime if we did that. But I just want to say that Israel hasn't actually signed on to that, so technically we wouldn't be doing anything illegal.
Yeah,
I think that's a very stupid, that's a stupid argument. I'm just saying the use of white phosphorus to burn people, horrific, we don't do it. What Israel does do is that we use white phosphorus as flares. So when people say white phosphorus was used, yes, technically that's correct, but it wasn't used against people. It was used in the air to light areas for our activities. And this is something that we do consistently. It's not a war crime, doesn't harm people. And it's very important not to, they hear white phosphorus, they think something like, we're launching gas into people's homes or we're burning people alive. That's not the case.
I thought it was also a smoke screen.
So I think that Rafi's point there is, I think, really an interesting way of explaining anti-Zionism in the context of the Middle East. But I think if the question is about the Middle East and the question of on like college campuses or sort of in the broad left of America, those are sort of different questions. So yes, it's true in the Middle East, a lot of it has to do with the decisions that places like Jordan have made to consciously make a decision to keep people in places that are approximately refugee camps for decades upon decades, with the intention of sort of forcing the issue of right of return and forcing this concept of being able to sort of ethnically have a majority Arab population within Israel. So that's a different thing, though, than when we talk about it in the United States. In the United States, I'd argue that a lot of the anti-Zionism is about a conflation between Jew and Israel. So earlier, I believe it was Goat, someone was bringing up the idea of the settlements. And in the West, the settlements are exclusively understood as being Israeli. And there's never an understanding of this as being Jewish people. They're always thought of as Israeli citizens, and part of that is it is true that they are primarily Israeli citizens because there is no Palestinian citizenship, and because the Palestinian Authority won't provide their sort of quasi status to Jews who are moving into the West Bank. And I think that that's sort of one component, but this goes beyond it. And when we think about what a Jew is in the United States, we think of what the Jews who live in the United States are, which is majority white-looking Jews. It's Jews who look like me. It's not Arab Jews. It's not Ethiopian Jews.
Ashkenazis.
It's Ashkenazis. I was trying to avoid that word because I wanted to make it so that people who aren't Jewish would understand. But yes, it's Ashkenazi, not Sephardi, and that sort of undercurrent does change the way that we map American race relations onto the race relations of Israel and of the Middle East more generally.
So you think it's at least in America, right? At least in America, maybe Canada too, that it's more of an artifact of how we view race relations in white versus black.
Yeah,
and you think that people are just mapping that on to that conflict? Is that your claim here?
Yeah, which is doubly complicated because the truth is that's not even actually accurate of American race. I mean, in America, the majority of hate crimes are against Jews. We're literally less than 1% of the population of the country, and we are the majority of hate crimes in the country.
60%,
right?
if I'm
60%. Yeah, 60% of all hate crimes in America are against Jewish people, and people are shocked
and Jewish
when they hear
people
that. They
are
don't even
like
believe
less
it
than
when you say
1%
it.
of the
I'm shocked
population
at that,
in the
honestly.
United
Yeah,
States.
people literally don't believe it when we say things like that because they're so convinced that the hate crimes must be going against other racial groups. But the truth is that, like, when you talk about right-wing anti-Semitism, it's very different than left-wing anti-Semitism. And right-wing anti-Semitism requires a race traitor, right? If you talk about right-wing anti-Semitism, in particular in the United States, it's built out of this concept of like, okay, simultaneously black people are replacing us, and also black people are fundamentally stupid and fundamentally incapable of like doing anything on their own. So for those two things to function requires a white race traitor, requires someone who is as smart as an actual white person, but is trying to screw over the white man. And that's where the Jews fit in. And that's why racism of the United States is very often, for like, as you walk down the street, the experience for the most part as a Jewish person is sort of approximately as a white person. But in the case of the most virulent racists of our country, they are incredibly hateful towards specifically Jewish people.
Let's talk about that for just a moment. Hate crimes and the rise in hate crimes since October 7th. Has this changed how safe you feel? Right? Has October 7th, and in what ways? Like, what has in your daily lives changed since October 7th? And you wanted to speak, Jason, so I'm going to let you go first.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing to what Quibbles was saying a second ago, which was there was a good short documentary piece done by a British comedian, 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙, called "Jews Don't Count," which basically talks about how, because Jews are white passing, and I say that very deliberately, that the experience of being a white passing Jewish person is that you are only white when it is convenient, and you are not white when it is convenient for whoever is criticizing.
Yep.
That I think it sounds like everybody kind of agrees with that. But
can you elaborate that though for my audience who may not, and for me who is not a Jew, right? So can you maybe
Well, yeah. So in the context, and people can correct me because this is I'm not like not the biggest expert on this topic, but at least in the context of left-wing criticism, like we were just talking about, right? That we're just seen as white people settling brown people, and therefore bad, right? Whereas among right-wing people, we are kind of masquerading as white people, and we're not actually pure, and therefore we're actually a nefarious entity. And so you're kind of beset on both sides.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know if anybody else wants to build
I
on
guess
that.
I interrupted you. Go ahead.
He is absolutely right, and that's just like the way I feel. I don't think it's the way it's always been, but like in the last 200 years, it's what it's felt like. No matter how much you contribute to the society that you find yourself living in, it's always like the suspicion, like, oh, my neighbor, he works at the bank, but that's obvious. Like, he's a Jew. Like, of course, they all work at the bank, and there's like all these tropes throughout the centuries about like Jews are always associated with this, and even like, I'll tell you this.
racist,
sorry, go on.
anti-Semitic jokes become like normalized, and things that you wouldn't say to a black person, you would say to like cliches that you would use with black people are like wrong, and it's not okay to joke about, like, to take racist jokes, but for some reason anti-Semitic jokes are all right. Like,
Everyone knows a Jew joke. Like,
Yep.
yeah.
And I also wanted to. Oh, go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just about to say that like my grandfather works in Hollywood, and that is such a
I'm
consistent.
so sorry for you.
No, I know. It's honestly mind-blowing like how consistently like those specific stereotypes get dropped, and everyone's just like, "Oh, some
And
George
it's
Soros type
normal.
person." And I'm like, "That's my grandfather that you're talking about. Like that is my who I'm named after. Like that's my first name. Like I'm named after directly is." And it's just like it's such a strange specific place to
Double
be in
standard.
where like someone is like they're almost like talking about someone like as if they're like some secret like third party entity, as if they're not right in front of you, and it's a very strange place to be in sometimes.
I'm sorry, go on. I was actually saying that kind of
Mhm.
cuts both ways though, because I forget what it's called. Is it the racism of expectations or something?
The
Sure.
pre-approval
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah.
So it's like you always. I don't. I know a lot of us here. I'm sure we have. We're in like IT or business or something like that. I don't know what everyone does for a living. I come from a background of like blue collar working Jews. My father worked in a factory for 35 years. I work as a baker. So like no one expects that of me as a Jew. They're always like, oh well, why didn't you go to law school, or didn't your mom want you to be a doctor? Or I'm like, that just didn't pan out for me. I don't know what to tell you.
Stack Games, you were saying though.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't hear.
Sorry, I'll be louder.
I forgot where I was going with that specifically. But I will kind of disagree with the panel. I don't feel threatened in any specific individual way. I will say I'm fairly privileged because I'm not practicing, so I don't have like I feel like a synagogue would be the first place that would be targeted. So I will like acknowledge my privilege there. But I think that what I've gotten is a couple snide comments from friends who I thought I could trust with regards to this thing. Like, oh, I thought that you would understand I would have some nuanced perspective on this. I thought that you would understand that I would like understand the specific plight of a group of people, and I'd be sympathetic to that. But it feels very targeted in a way that make me feel not great, but like I don't feel
Your safety
targeted.
isn't threatened.
I don't feel my
like
safety
someone's
is
gonna-
intense. Correct. I
gonna
don't feel
hurt
my
you.
safety is no. And I will say like I'm in America, right? Like I would feel very differently if I lived in Israel right now.
Or Europe.
I'm just curious,
Fair.
Stax, wasn't there a grenade
Yeah.
tied to the entrance of a synagogue like 2 days ago?
Yeah, and that's what I'm
Wasn't a
saying
woman
is like
stabbed
I
to death?
feel.
But I'm just curious, like,
No,
how
no,
can
no.
you say that you don't feel? I'm not saying you should be scared. Like, 𝕬𝖎 𝖲, like everyone should feel
Sure.
safe and happy. But
Sure.
I'm just curious how you can see like acts of random violence carried out like this against people because they are Jewish, and not feel, oh, that might be me.
Like I was saying, I think that would happen at a synagogue.
Let's let Stack Teams answer the question, right? Let's let
all
Stack
I'm
Teams
trying to say
address
is I think that every I feel safe and secure enough. I don't feel like I need to defend that necessarily, but I will say I don't go to synagogue regularly. Like the last time I've been is 5 or 6 years ago, and that was mostly just for cousins, for family members. Like I feel a little bit for their safety, for sure. I feel a little shaky with that, especially since like I don't know. It was I saw some really heinous comments every once in a while with like I don't know if you saw there was this tweet that Bernie Sanders was just like mourning. He was like, "This is the 5-year anniversary of the Tree of Life synagogue shooting," and all of the comments were like, "Fuck you, you Zionist piece of." After he was like very adamantly pro-Palestine, and I feel like this. I definitely agree that being anti-Zionist does not make you anti-Semitic, but I think that sword cuts both ways, where you start implying that because people are Jewish that they are Zionist, that is anti-Semitic, if that makes sense. So,
yeah, so I'm actually a
Go
member
ahead,
of
Quibbles.
Tree of Life. I'm actually a member of
Oh,
Tree of
really?
Life. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely don't feel physically safe.
Yeah, no, and I think that's fair. I'm just trying to give my perspective. I'm not.
No, fair enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to sort of go through my history of like physical safety. even before the shooting, I grew up a Reformed Jew in Connecticut, and from my birth until I was around 10, we went to shul pretty regularly and without concern. And then when I was about 10, I was 10 years old, so I don't know the exact specifics and haven't asked the exact specifics of why. But all of a sudden, we needed to have a police officer outside of the shul every single time that anyone was inside. And that was when I was 10 years old. And then I went to college. And when I was a sophomore in college, Tree of Life shooting happened. I wasn't yet a member, but I had close friends who had grown up members of Tree of Life, including the then president of 𝕾𝖎𝖙, which was the Jewish fraternity, which I was a very involved member of. It was a mile away from campus, and during the immediate aftermath of that, campus police explicitly told us that even though we had the only kosher kitchen in the entire campus, we had an obligation to lock the doors. We had always sort of propped open the door so that women who were not members would be able to use the kosher kitchen. And all of a sudden, we were no longer allowed to prop open the door. And even now, 5 years after the shooting, as a member of Tree of Life, we don't have our services in the Tree of Life building. We still don't have our services in the Tree of Life building. And there's a very good reason for that. And so, yeah, there's an undergirding sort of, there's a lot of this that ends up being about like, oh, like, how dare you, be concerned. It's silly for you to be like thinking, and I'm not saying that you're saying this, but certainly there
Sure.
are people on
Sure.
Twitter who just sort of like frame this whole thing like it's a matter of like Twitter beef and people are saying inappropriate stuff. It's not. There is absolutely a component of this that is absolutely being propelled by the failure of the left to protect Jews, to protect and make there be space for us to have an ability to talk about our problems
Well,
as a religious minority.
I'll give you an example from my chat. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
the Rustic Fool is saying shit like 12,000 dead Palestinians, and we were having our third panel talking about the feelings of
the
Jewish
numbers game
people in
again.
America, not
Sure.
even specifically Israelis, right? So he's not saying Zionists. He's saying Jewish, like Jewish people, like Jewish people's feelings
Sure.
being discussed. How dare we? While there's 12,000 Palestinians dead, right? How dare we discuss what Jewish people feel? They're just Jews, right? And so that makes me mad, and I'm not a Jew, right? So I'm just curious, like, that reaction is so common in this space that we would never have that reaction for black people. We would never have that reaction for Hispanic people. We would never have that reaction for any other group. But because it's Jews, no Jews, no news. Unless Jews are doing it, it doesn't count, right? Like, and if it affects Jews, fuck them. And that is disgusting to me. So, Rustic Fool, fuck you. Anyway, carry on.
People just can't attack Zionism as a concept, so they attack the first closest thing to it, which is Israeli or Jewish people in general. Jewish people that you can, detect in the community or whatever. Because Zionism is so broad a concept that you can't detect it in society, and we're just gonna attack the Zionists, or like it's never just like attack the IDF specifically in Israel. It's every Israeli and Jew is targeted. We're gonna talk globally,
I think that
so Jews.
fundamentally, there's a huge issue that Judaism as an identity, as a group, like Jews, we don't map well onto the Western conceptions of race or ethnicity or religion.
That's true.
None of these concepts really apply to us because they were all created in a framework that grew out of the way that Europe views these concepts, right? Which is broadly homogenous groups of people living together. You don't really have any kind of tribal identities. They were all wiped out by the Romans. In the Middle East, we still have ongoing existence of tribal identity. To be a Jew, it is a tribal identity. We can talk about the word I generally try to use is an ethno. You can't separate these things from each other. And unfortunately, there are very few ethno-religions left in the world. I would point maybe to the Druze, who live both here in Syria, also in Lebanon. I guess indigenous people in North and South America would also probably still maintain some sense of an ethno-religion. But there are very few groups in the world because most of them were colonized. In the Middle East, most of them were wiped out by the Islamic expansion. So there are just very few groups left. So there's not a framework through which to view us. We're viewed as white because, well, we did come from these countries, even though we didn't really intermarry, or we can genetically show that we're all similar to each other. And then we're not just a religion because there are Jews who are secular, right? So we can't just be called a religion. We don't map well onto any conception that leftists use to form these hierarchies of who is in power, who isn't in power. We're also a minority that's been oppressed, but is highly successful. And so that, again, causes an issue in the framework of how leftists view this. And I think that this is what drives leftist anti-Semitism, leftist anti-Zionism, is that we can't really be neatly fit into any of this framework. Whereas the Palestinians, in the way that they express their suffering and in the way they express their identity to the international community, they fit very neatly into this framework. It is very easy to view the Palestinians simply as an ethnic group that is being oppressed by someone else. And whereas with Jews, it's very difficult to understand, like, who are we? Why? Who is oppressing us? Who isn't oppressing? What is happening with us? Why are some Jews black, some Jews are white, some Jews are from the Middle East? Like, how can this possibly be a single group? And so there is just an inability to conceptualize us within this framework that they're operating.
$5 from Jenny Burns to ask, what role do you think Christian Zionism has in the way Zionism is portrayed in the discussion of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Great question.
Scary.
Yeah.
Scary. Can you elaborate a little bit?
So I kind of feel like it doesn't. I don't think it comes from a good place per se, because I kind of think like they're using Zionism as like a prop. And I don't mean this like I have Christian family and Gentile friends and all that other stuff, but it's like you're making us a part of like your death cult. Like the Jews must be in this land in order for the second coming, and God help them if they decide that they still want to be Jews because they're going to die. And that's like literally like how it starts and how it ends. Like the Jews must be there so that we can have what we want.
We're the useful idiots.
Yeah. Mostly, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't think it comes from any kind of good place.
We are the human sacrifice they need.
Specifically, I'm kind of a weird voice on the panel in this case because I was actually raised Christian. My mom is Christian and my dad's Jewish, so it's kind of like this weird blend. I know a lot of people wouldn't necessarily consider myself Jewish because my mom's not, but so I was raised like a lot of like cultural aspects through the Judaism lens, but I went to like a Christian church, Mormon specifically. So like I heard this shit all the time, and it was very weird to hear. And I would talk to my dad. My dad made it was like very uncomfortable for all of us, because if anyone's not really clear about like Christian doctrine, in the book of Revelation, they make it pretty explicitly clear that like essentially in order for Jesus to return again to the second coming, the Jews have to have a homeland, and then they essentially like die for Jesus to come again. And it's fucking bizarre, and it is very weird. And I never really knew how to grapple with it exactly, and I'm very curious how other people have like. I think that's a huge reason as well as to why so many Republicans are so vehemently pro-Israel, and that's a very strange place to be in when you're sympathetic to Israel in some cases. When you look in your corner and you're like, oh, I'm not comfortable with you fuckers, like that's so.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'll flag is that when anti-Zionists talk about Zionism, it's very frequently a conversation that is around like Jews and specifically around AIPAC. When the truth is that CUFI, for example, Christian United for Israel, is literally a larger organization. It has more members than does AIPAC, right? And the broader, and AIPAC is not exclusively Jewish, whereas Christian United for Israel is exclusively Christian, right?
But I think AIPAC contributes more money, right? I think that's
it contributes more money, but the Jewish proportion of it is not.
So people are going to look at the impact. They're going to look at the impact of it, right?
Yeah. And so the impact is voters, I think, arguably matter more. And the majority of voters who are pro-Israel voters are voters who are voting on the basis of Christianity, not on the basis of Judaism. And I think that there's that sort of over focus on Jewish pro-Zionism is weird. It's uncomfortable. And I don't like it because it ends up sort of playing at this idea of like Jewish money, this idea of like, Jews being sort of having their tentacles everywhere.
Zion organized government kind of thing.
Yeah, I think
it's really
in a way I disagree almost with everything that everyone has said on this topic, funnily enough. I think that the impact of Christian Zionism is radically overestimated. I think the impact of Jewish Zionism outside of Israel is radically overestimated when we're talking about how it actually impacts the U.S.'s involvement with Israel. Israel serves pretty much essential functions for the U.S. in their foreign policy in the Middle East. We serve essential functions for them
When
in
you
terms
say
of their
essential
defense
functions,
industry.
what do you mean?
I guess without going into too much detail in terms of intelligence networking and operating bases and operating like staging operations.
Well, I think we need an ally in the region is essentially what you're saying, and Israel is someone who we would very
not just an
obviously
ally, but an
A
ally with
Western
aligned
ally.
interests and values. Yes.
Sure.
To be
It was
honest,
democracy,
which
right?
is basically just Israel. Like there isn't really any other option. And so
Right.
I think that there's a reason that regardless of how religious most politicians are in the US, regardless, any politician that's competent and understands like foreign policy is going to end up supporting Israel. And I don't think that AIPAC really has any big effect here. I don't think that Christian
Yeah, I
Zionists
think
have
that
any big
that's
impact here. The US, and when we talk about the US subsidies to their arms industries and we talk about them as like donations to Israel, it's a little crazy, right? That, I mean, really fundamentally what the US is doing is supporting its own arms industry by giving us money and then requiring us to exclusively spend it in the US. Right? It's not like we can use that money somewhere else. We have to use it in the US.
I understand
So
where you're
there's
coming
a
from.
lot of, we also are responsible for weapons testing, weapons development for the US. Many of the more recent defensive systems for tanks that the US now uses came out of Israel. Rocket defense comes out of Israel, especially very advanced radar and flight equipment for jets is now coming out of Israel. I mean, not even to speak of like the software, that like military software that we develop here. The US is completely, I wouldn't say reliant, but the US needs, right? It's a symbiotic relationship.
People
And
totally
no
totally
number,
downplay.
yeah, no number of Christian Zionists are causing this to happen. Like the politicians understand what's necessary, and I think it would require a huge, overwhelming like majority of people to be anti-Zionist in the U.S. to actually have any impact on the politicians.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that so particularly the software component, you're 100% right. I know a number of people who are in the software world who have specifically been sent by the government of Israel to come to the United States to go to school in the United States, to go back to be involved in the IDF. And yeah, that's a huge component of it. And you're definitely right that from a geopolitical perspective, it's really useful to have an Israel from an American perspective. I think that the part that I was trying to point out there was that there's this like when we talk about American Zionism, when we're trying to talk about it, not just from a geopolitical lens, but from a lens of like a cultural component, like why culturally do people care about Israel in the United States? The cultural concern about Israel extends beyond, and I agree with you that Israel is increasingly less and less reliant on American aid and is increasingly able to handle herself on her own. But the reason that we care about Israel as Americans and the reason that Jews care about Israel aren't one-to-one in a way that I think quite often they're framed as though they are. But broadly, I agree with what you're saying.
Jews are the perpetual monolith when it comes to criticism.
Sure.
Can I also I wanted to take a sec to back up a little bit because I didn't get to talk a little bit about the safety issue. Because I'm a Jewish presenting person. Like I wear a 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙, I wear a kippah on my head. And yeah, since the 7th, this was the most I've ever felt unsafe walking the streets in my entire life, and I live in like a pretty major metropolitan area. I also shared that experience with 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 about as a kid, just randomly synagogue just had cop cars sitting outside there, and I would ask, and it'd say, "Well, there were some threats," and I'm like, "Why would people threaten us?" So that was kind of experience when I was pretty young as well. And in terms of like what I've experienced, on a daily basis, I see all sorts of those kidnap posters, and either up or torn down. And one thing that I kind of I saw one of those videos of people tearing down posters, and there was something that somebody said that I thought evoked some powerful thoughts with me, which is that it appears that Jews are not allowed to be victims for whatever reason. Maybe it's because we are pretty disproportionate representation among the most successful in a lot of society. For whatever reason, we are simply not allowed to be victims, and maybe it's because we're white passing, right? That's another example of the the Jews don't count, whether it's only white when you're convenient and not when you're not. And then lastly, my personal safety experiences since the 7th. I've been at a bar where people walked by me and started singing Jewish songs as they walked by me. More specifically, I was walking home with my roommate, and we were walking home, a female friend of ours, and we're a block away from her building, and a guy sees us walking with her and says, "Yo, you got to get away from them. They're gonna rape you. I've seen the Jews do that. The Jews are gonna rape you." And continued to follow us while screaming, "They're gonna rape you. They're gonna rape you," over and over and over again. Um, and that was kind of insanity. I've never felt such a direct threat before like that. Um, I have also been on the subway where I've sat down next to Muslim women and they've gotten up and sat somewhere else. I don't think any other group, other than the Jews, have had to worry about global days of jihad or anything similar called for against them. I think, I don't know how many people know about this, but there were two separate days, two separate Fridays in October where calls for violence against Jews globally were cast, both from Hamas and also, underreported for some reason, the Palestinian Authority, in response to the Shifa, to the Ali hospital bombing. When I told my boss about that, and I said, "I don't feel safe coming into work today," his response was, "If the things that are happening over there are affecting you so much, maybe you should pay less attention to it."
Jesus.
Dick.
Let's
So
go capitalism.
okay, I'm not going down that road. But yeah, so it has been more prevalent more than ever in my life, to feel unsafe, to feel invalid, and as a Jewish person, as a Jewish presenting person.
This is
That's a shame,
something.
dude.
This is something that I've seen a lot, right? Famously in this sphere, at least, aristocracy, right? The day after October 7th, or maybe 2 days after, she was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, I really don't feel safe in Canada right now with all this stuff going on." And people were just like basically told her to calm down, right? Like, calm down, you're overreacting. Why do you feel threatened, right? There is this, as you said,
And
this
before you know it,
tendency-
they had to evacuate the school because there was a threat.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep.
Twice.
The school in, I think, France, that they gave permission to the Jewish students, because it was a Jewish school, to not wear their uniforms because they would be identified as Jews. And the concept that
That's
something also
scary. That's so
something
scary.
yeah, something else that I feel like people do not understand, because my boss did not understand this either, that things that happen in Israel impact Jews everywhere around the
Mhm.
world. It's not up to us whether we have to answer for whatever things are happening there. And it's something that people do not seem to understand at all.
Yeah.
And to
Yeah,
be honest,
and
like in
I
that
think-
sense, in the sense of like the waves after something really big, like the 7th here happens,
Mhm.
like because we're in Israel and we're relatively safe when it comes to other stuff. After the 7th, obviously we weren't safe then, but like when it comes to protests and stuff like that, and violence and threats like that, I feel more safe than
And
like
pogroms.
every other. Yeah, I feel more
Yeah.
safe than every other person
Yeah.
anywhere else in the world, probably.
Yeah, which
yeah,
makes
so
you think
you
twice
guys
if you
take
want to do a
the
vacation abroad
yeah.
Well, I
right
think-
now.
Component
Yeah,
I think is
yeah.
really worth thinking about, because I mean, yeah, I had a really interesting conversation recently with my sister about what it means for Jewish organizations to have political statements in reference to Israel, and it's really hard, because the truth is that when you start being engaged in politics, particularly in something that is at this point increasingly been understood as really controversial, which I don't think it should be, but when even in the direct response to the 7th, not in response to like what Israel did to try to combat it going forward, but on the 7th itself, like people are, I remember myself, I went to a thing at the JCC, at the Jewish Community Center, and there was a rally for Israel there, which had hundreds of people show up, most of them Jews, not exclusively Jews, but most of them Jews, unsurprisingly. And it's really dangerous because then you might have protests outside of the JCC, outside of a Jewish building, because now this Jewish building and this Jewish organization has named itself as being pro-Israel. And there's a danger to that. And particularly there's a danger to it when, in the case of Pittsburgh, we do have this history. But even outside of Pittsburgh, across the country as a whole, and across the West as a whole, it's like, that's a massively difficult conversation to be having. And it's doubly difficult when there's even a small portion of Jews who are not Zionists. And that small portion who are not Zionists, it's made incredibly difficult for them to be a component of Jewish life and to simultaneously have these complexities on this issue, which is difficult for everyone, but particularly difficult for Jews.
I guess I want to kind of dig into the concept of Israel as itself and as it exists today. Do you think that the government of Israel represents you? Like, because you mentioned, Jason, you mentioned that what Israel does and what happens over there, right? What happens in Israel does affect you as a Jewish person. Let's talk about it. Like, do you think Israel is conducting itself in a manner that makes you more or less safe?
I'm certainly not going to jump to defend every single thing that the government does, and whether it represents me personally, maybe I don't in some ways yes, and in some ways no. I'm not intimately involved with Israeli politics. I have many friends and I have family directly that live there and are involved and are much more involved than I am. But at the same time, it's kind of, and I'm not criticizing you, Wick, for the question, but how many would we have tolerated being
it's okay to
yeah.
criticize a question if you'd like.
Would Americans have tolerated? I mean, I certainly don't remember tolerating, foreigners calling me a racist because Donald Trump was my president. Right? I don't really see why that association even particularly matters. I don't live in Israel. I'm not like a lot of people I know, a single issue voter in America with respect to Israel. I think that's shitty to do. If you're gonna be a single issue voter on Israel, you should live in Israel. But I think the association is unfair. I don't think that I should have to answer for Israeli politics. I just don't.
Nor should you have to be afraid because of what happens over there. Like I said, I have a son, but I also have a nephew who goes to a Jewish day school, and he's a year and a half now. And I think to myself all the time, at any given moment, I'm the closest person to the day school, and I'm like the second, I won't even say anything to my manager. I'm gone because that's just what I'm going to have to do, and I have that over my head constantly, and I have nothing to do with it. He certainly doesn't have anything to do with it. Something happening an ocean away has a cascading effect on my life. And it's just, I agree, it's totally unfair, and I just don't know what to do about that.
Yeah, none of it should happen. The thing is, it is, but I think talking about the experience is important. I don't know.
The question of whether or not it should be the case, of course it shouldn't be the case, but it is the case. And so given that it's the case, my answer to it is actually that I think I personally would probably be safer if Israel didn't exist. Because I personally am an example of a person who, my family had already moved here prior to the Holocaust. And therefore we personally were already safe. And so therefore the fact that Israel has forced the conversation around Jews to the forefront has put a focus on Jews in America in a way that it probably wouldn't exist otherwise. But on the other hand, I think that the overwhelming majority of the Jews who live in Israel would literally be dead if they weren't in Israel. And so the question of whether it's safer for me or not isn't really a question that I'm comfortable seeing as the most relevant question when comparing it to the question of whether Jews as a whole would be safer with or without Israel, to which the obvious answer is that we would be far less safe as a whole without Israel.
Does everyone agree with that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think what should be acknowledged is the reason why this conversation seems so difficult is because there's kind of not really a situation similar to it, in that um, it's kind of a U.S. sanctioned ethno state, and I mean that in with all of the nuance that that requires, because I understand why an ethno state is kind of required. Like I'm totally sympathetic to the reason why we feel like we need to um, have our own borders and have our own state and have our own government. I mean, my grandfather came from Poland to escape the Holocaust. I assume that almost every single person on this planet, on this panel, has family who were killed in the Holocaust. And
Yeah,
I think that we
I was gonna
all,
ask how many people had were the relatives or the grandchild of a survivor.
yeah, yeah. And I'm a grandchild of a survivor, and like
So
that is um that, like, I understand why we feel the need for an ethno state, but I also understand that, like, I ethically am just kind of anti-segregationist. I don't think that that's a long-lasting bridge to peace. I don't think that that setting up borders. Goat, you said something at the very beginning that I thought was kind of interesting, where you said, like, well, here's where we feel safe. Israel's where we feel safe. And my rebuttal to that is, are they safe? I mean, like, October
We're
7th,
Yeah,
alive.
Israel.
because
First, we
like,
have to be
Comparatively,
alive in
okay,
order to make
No, no,
peace.
no. What I'm trying to
the
say is,
point of
Well,
Israel,
hold
you
on.
can, yeah,
Let Staxians finish
well,
his
let's not
question.
jump down
we
his
should
throat.
we should
Don't jump down
acknowledge
his throat. Yeah.
we should
yeah,
acknowledge that they are at the center of like 6 different enemies geopolitically, right? You got just looking at the basic area, and we should look at the Hamas attacks. They killed 1,200 people. I think, like, I guess what I'm saying is there is constant violence at their borders, and I don't think that
I
they
wouldn't
are
say
safe
that.
there
Right,
either.
they're only there
Well,
because they
let's
were
let
forced out of Ethiopia.
I'm not
and
disagreeing
on.
with that.
I
I'm just
see your
trying to
super
say
chats.
that
I'll get to your
So it's
super chats
pointless, I
after we
think.
get through this, right? So $10, and we'll answer this later,
Yeah,
but
I
I'll
mean,
read
like,
it now. $10 from Lawson Harrison. Would Jewish people be more safe if Israel didn't exist, or if Islam doesn't exist? But we'll talk about that later. I wanted to
yeah.
hear Goat's
Stacks.
response to that, right?
Oh.
I wanted to hear Goat and Quibbles and actually Goat, Mono, and Rafi. You are all in Israel, right? So I want you
Yes.
to respond to that.
Okay,
That
Go
being
ahead,
Staxiums,
Zuka.
yeah.
yeah, I don't think that you can say that Israel, like, Jews would be safer if Israel didn't exist. That statement is, I don't know, it's kind of weird, because anti-Semitism after World War II didn't really disappear, okay, from Europe, and saying that, like, if all these Jews that survived the Holocaust, like, had no place to go, they would just stay there. I don't know, like, it's just,
Sorry, I just want to be clear about what I specifically said. I was not addressing a counterfactual in that Israel wouldn't exist and we would be somehow safer, or that suddenly, like, this would be a better situation. All I'm trying to, like, look at is the specific situation right here. Jews still aren't safe in Israel. That's all I'm trying to say. Like that,
I don't
I'm
know.
not.
I think they're safer than in Israel than in Europe, okay?
Sure.
Because when I walk on the
Wait.
streets of Israel, I know that people are gonna protect me, okay? That we have our army that protects me, like, protects us, okay? We have so many systems at place that work in order to protect every Jewish civilian, and this does not exist abroad, okay? Like, in Europe, you can walk on the street and someone can just do, like, a hate crime towards you, and, like, there are no systems that are up for, like, handling this, okay, or preventing this.
Yeah, like
Like,
I'm
I feel
Polish
safer walking the
heritage. Like,
streets in Israel than in Europe, at least right now, because
mhm.
although, yes, we're having, like, lots of bombings and stuff like that, but still, I don't have to fear that someone's gonna, like, knife me down in an alley, okay? That's
Or
a
you
fear
get
that I do not
pogromed. I
have.
mean,
Yeah, I want
You
to.
live
Yeah,
in.
I want to. I
Fair,
want
you
to.
live
I
in
don't
Israel,
I don't
right?
have to fear people to I don't have to be fear, like, being scared of walking in a pro-Palestinian protest and being harassed. I don't have to fear that because everybody here, like,
And Bear,
it's
you live in Israel, right?
yes.
I guess my question is, like, I don't know why you guys were frustrated that I didn't fear for my life when I lived in I live in Utah, America. But like, I mean, especially after October 7th, I don't know how you don't fear for that. You know what I'm saying? Like when like a music festival gets
It's a very
formed.
different fear than if I would go back to my, I don't know, my ancestral homeland of Poland, and
Mhm.
people could just pogrom me and no
Yeah.
one would
I think
stand
the
up for me.
fear-
I think it's a
Like-
fear of different
Yeah,
types
and there
of
are no
extremism.
law.
I want to point something out. It's the fear of being persecuted by the majority of a single country, by being a minority in a single country or whatever entity, and being persecuted.
And you
by
can't predict it. You can't even predict
think
that
one-
these
you can't
attacks.
predict
And
that
also-
it will happen because it's never stopped
Yeah.
happening. That's
Yeah.
why Jewish people will
I
not be
almost-
safer without Israel.
I'd
almost
also
wanna
kind of like
We
to
would
touch on this
rather
idea
have-
of the
Well, I want to give
ethno state.
Rafi
I
a
mean,
chance. Go ahead,
I
Rafi.
have a big issue when people bring up this idea that we should oppose Israel or Zionism because it's an ethno state. I mean, the
Mhm.
majority of countries in the world are ethno states, right?
Yeah.
Just a flat out majority of the world.
Absolutely.
So
But it's
I
not a
fail to
requirement for
fail to see
citizenship,
why.
right?
But it,
I don't
being
agree that
being like
either
a
that-
legally written down requirement is meaningless when it's effectively true, right? If the country enforces it, if it is not possible for someone who's not a part of the majority ethnic group to ever come to power in that country, that's functionally an ethno state, right? If people are given not as many rights because they're not of the same ethnicity, that's an ethno state. It doesn't matter if legally you might be able to give them a lot of money and immigrate there, right? The majority of countries in the world are ethno states. I don't really see anything inherently wrong with an ethno state. I think that sometimes we have problems with the way the governments function, but I don't think that something being in an ethno state inherently means that it's going to be unethical. We can definitely envision very
Yeah.
ethical
I think
ethno
if we're going to
states
talk about
and
this, we
very
have to define what
unethical
we mean by
non-ethno
ethno
states,
state.
right?
I mean, I could
think we need to
absolutely agree.
define what you mean by ethno state here, because it is certainly true that Israel is an ethnic majority Jewish state, but the question of being an ethnic majority something and being an ethno state, I think, are different things. When I think of an ethno state, I think of somewhere where people who are not part of that ethnicity have been forced out, and there is no minority who is not of that type. And so when I think about the fact that Jews were forced out of basically literally every other place in the totality of the Middle East, that would be an example of an ethnic cleansing. That would be an example of
I agree.
an
Yep.
ethno state. And so
Yeah.
when I think about Israel and I think about a 20% minority Arab population, when I think about a place which currently has an Arab member of its Supreme Court, a place that the very previous majority control over the Knesset, over the parliament, included Arab parties, it's very difficult for me to consider that to genuinely be an ethno state. I'm uncomfortable with that term.
But, right,
because
I think that's
that it
because we're
gives people
smuggling
this
in all of the
idea.
bad parts, all of the
Yeah,
bad
yeah.
implications
Yeah,
of
but
ethno
that's
state
talking about
into the
Zionism.
concept, right?
I think that this might be a difference between the way that the term is used in America versus how it's used in Israel.
Yeah.
When people in America hear the term ethno state, they're hearing it in the context that we're hearing Hitler. They're hearing it in the context that we mean it when we're talking about a place where people who are not of that ethnicity do not have rights. And in Israel proper, which I want to separate out from the West Bank, it is not true that in Israel proper that Palestinians, that Arabs who are non-Jews lack rights in a fundamental sense that is on par to
But a
something
question
like
on
South
that.
Africa,
But a
on
question
par to
on
something
that,
like
right?
Nazi
I want to
Germany. Go for it.
push back on that a little bit, Quibbles, and maybe I'm just ignorant here, and you can correct my ignorance, right?
Yeah.
But as I understand it, in Israel proper, being Jewish does confer special privileges on you that you don't get as a Palestinian. For example, right, like anyone of Israelish descent can become a citizen of Israel in a way that someone
Jewish
who is
descent.
not,
Yeah.
right?
Jewish
Or
descent.
sorry, Jewish. My bad.
You're fine. Go for it.
Someone who is not Jewish just can't, right? Is that not an example of a special
Yeah, so
privilege being
I would
given
say-
to?
I think it's a little ridiculous to
So I
say
would say-
Israel.
The
It might make us feel
definition of-
better, but I don't. I think it's
okay, one at a time, one at a time, one at a
weird.
time, one at a time, one at a time.
Okay.
We're gonna go
Well, I think
Quibbles
at the
first
answer-
because I asked Quibbles,
yeah.
then we'll go Rafi, then we'll go
So-
we'll go to Goat. Go ahead.
Okay, so when I think about the policy of protecting Jews, part of the history of Israel is that it just simply is true that Jews have not been safe consistently anywhere else on earth other than arguably the United States over the past 100 years since the founding of Israel. And so in that context, I want for Israel to be permitted to save Ethiopian Jews. I want it to be a place where Ethiopian Jews can be safe, knowing that they are no longer safe in Ethiopia, knowing that Jews are no longer safe in Egypt or Iraq or Iran or Saudi. Go down the list, right? And so that as an immigration policy, I don't think requires that once a person is a citizen of Israel, once a person is part of that society, that they can't have the rights and privileges that are afforded to all citizens in context of a citizen of Israel once they're a citizen. Now, I will flag that there are components, not in terms of immigration, but there are components even once you are a citizen of Israel, which are dissimilar in terms of the way that people who are Arab versus people who are Jewish are able to operate. So the most notable one is the fact that because marriage is controlled religiously, not through government, but through the religious components in Israel, it's very difficult for people to manage to have intermarriage between different religious groups. It's very difficult for people to have certain things that we would understand as rights in the United States. And I think those things are awful. But I don't think that they get to the point where I'm comfortable calling it an ethno-state.
Okay, I wanted to hear from Rafi, then go.
Yeah, I think it's really weird that we're fixating in on trying to say that all ethno-states must be bad. I mean, let me ask you. I guess I'll ask the panel if anyone wants to answer, but specifically really to 𝕾𝑍𝖎. If we had a sudden demographic shift, and there was a vast majority of Muslims in Israel, and they enacted a Sharia law, right? Not pejoratively, right? They enacted, like the literal sense of Sharia law. They enacted Islamic law here. They got rid of our fragmented system, right, where each people is governed by their own religious system. Would you still consider that to be Israel? They keep the same name, the same flag, but it's now a country that operates under Sharia law. Right? I think your inability to
Israel,
right?
Of course not.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, it's no longer Israel, right? So I think that quibbling over this idea that we're not an ethno-state.
The founding principles.
That I'm saying that quibbling over this, when we talk about Israel, right, we're talking about a Jewish state. It must inherently have a Jewish character. It must be there to protect Jews. And quibbling over this, it's not about like we ought to and we do have equal rights.
I just don't think that you understand.
But that doesn't make us not.
Let Rafi finish before we go into it. Rafi, hold on. Rafi, go ahead, please.
I'm trying to express that just we are an ethno-state and we protect our Jewish character does not mean that every single citizen can't have equal rights, right? Especially, for instance, when we talk about aliyah, the law of return, it actually, for instance, it doesn't even technically apply to citizens. I mean, if we're even going to get into the weeds of this, right?
Like how
it applies
the
to non-citizens.
Defined,
yeah. Every country
Jewish
allows
people. That's exactly who. Yeah.
Every country allows people, or most countries allow, if they operate under jus sanguinis, most countries that have will allow people who are descended of that country to get citizenship, even if they weren't born there. So for us, that is Jews. Jews are the ones that are descended from this country.
The term ethno-state. This is just literally from Oxford Dictionary. It's a sovereign state of which citizenship is restricted to members of a particular racial or ethnic group. That does not describe Israel.
Japan.
It just doesn't.
How come Israel's wrong and Japan's okay then? If ethno-states are something immoral.
I would consider it to be immoral.
I think that we're getting into like this semantic
we're not.
craziness.
No, it's relevant. It's not.
Then what would you? I'm just curious. What would you call? I feel like it's such a.
I would consider Israel to be a Jewish majority state. That is not the same. Like America.
Okay, but what would happen? What would happen if that majority was threatened?
America is Christian.
No, 𝕾𝑍𝖎.
What would happen? I'm trying to answer, but you keep on interrupting. America is Christian majority. That we are Christian majority is a component of what it means for America to be America, right? It would be a fundamentally different country.
I disagree fundamentally. America would still be America without a Christian majority.
100%.
Fundamentally different country. If America did
no,
not have
it might alter the character, but it would still be America. America is not based on an ethnic group or a religion. Israel is.
I'd like to finish my point. The history of America is built out of the history of Christendom in America. Okay. And so whatever the future of America may be, that is a relevant component of its history. And similarly, the history of Israel and its future must include the protection of Jews because Jews have been ethnically cleansed out of so many other places. But that does not give Israel the right, nor has Israel attempted to take away citizenship from non-Jewish Israelis.
Okay,
Were they to do
I'll ask
that,
you again,
I would
you didn't answer the question. What would we do if suddenly that demographic majority was under threat?
If that demographic majority was under
Yes.
under threat, then there would be a reason to have particular immigration laws. But particular immigration
No,
laws
okay,
do
but there
not.
are no quibbles. There are no Jews coming in. We're stuck. Whatever. We have a
There
giant
are
glass dome
immigration
drop down
laws.
over the country. No one can get in and out.
Okay.
What happens if there
There are
like, do
immigration
we-
laws in Israel, right?
I
immigration
understand,
laws
but
of
the majority that's fine.
So-
but let's
so I
you're
support-
not engaging with the
so I
hypothetical.
support-
Okay,
I
okay,
assume-
hey,
assume
stop,
that-
both of you, shut up right now. Okay, I'm gonna have to take care of this because I think you're missing each other. Okay, so I want Rafi to be very clear and concise in the hypothetical, and don't interrupt the hypothetical. And then when Quibbles answers, I need you to shut up too, Rafi. Okay, so I need these both things to happen. Okay, Rafi first, and then Quibbles. Go ahead.
Okay. So I understand the reluctance to get into these kinds of terms in the same way that Zionist has been tarnished, ethno-state has been tarnished. I think that so we have to understand, right? If Israel's meant to protect Jews, as you said, and if we were in a situation where there is no possible way to bring in more people or increase Jewish reproduction rate, okay, but the within 6 months there will be a significant majority Muslim population in Israel. Do you think that would continue to be Israel, or would the Israeli government necessarily need to do something about that, involving like removing people's citizenships?
Okay. So my answer is that if you are asking whether or not people should be stripped of their citizenship because
No, that's not what I'm asking. I don't want to interrupt, but that's not what I'm asking.
You literally did just ask that, whether or not we should strip people's citizenship. That is explicitly what you just said. Okay. If you're asking whether or not Israel should strip citizenship of non-Jews, the answer is, of course, no. Stripping citizenship is a fundamentally different act than restricting immigration. When you're asking about restricting immigration, that's perfectly legitimate. The definition of an ethno-state is a sovereign state of which citizenship is restricted. Citizenship is restricted. Not immigration, but citizenship is restricted to members of a particular racial or ethnic group. If you are describing that, that is 1, horrible, and 2, not representative of Israel now or Israel at any time in its past. It is not true.
If you're asking whether or not, but I'm asking, would Israel be able to continue existing?
I didn't interrupt
in that
you.
situation?
I didn't interrupt you. I'm trying to finish.
Okay.
If you're asking whether or not in a future that it could be potentially defensible for a Jewish ethno-state to take place in the place that is currently Israel, which would be fundamentally dissimilar from what Israel is currently, no, I would not support that ethno-state. I would absolutely support, as is currently the case, immigration laws, and I would absolutely support an active attempt to recruit, to pull in more Jews from outside of the territory that is currently Israel in order to maintain that ethnic majority Jewish majority. But that's different than forcibly removing citizenship, which I think is fundamentally evil and fundamentally different.
Again, I guess it's very
Go
nice.
ahead,
It's very morally big, but that's not the question I'm asking. I'm not asking you to support morally. Of course, it would be horrific to remove people's citizenship. I'm pointing out that the entire conception of Israel, if suddenly there was a huge demographic shift, we wouldn't call that country Israel. We would not say that there is a Jewish state anymore. So it seems to me just to be like very, I don't want to say weaselly, but why fight on this? Like why, it is a Jewish state, right? We call it the Jewish state. We had a nation state law passed here.
No.
Well, let Rafi finish.
We had a
Rafi
nation.
finish now.
Yeah, we had a nation. It's okay. He can interrupt. We're Jews. We talk over
You
each
didn't
other.
say.
That's not
You didn't ask whether or not it's a Jewish state.
The nuance.
Yeah.
You didn't ask whether or not it's a Jewish state. If you asked whether it's a Jewish state, I would say yes. That's a very different question than whether or not it's an ethno-state. Ethno-state and Jewish state are not the same thing.
Okay,
See, that's-
$5
yeah, that's
from
where I
Zephyr
disagree.
Hash to say ethno-state is so October 2023. The latest November 2023 lingo is apartheid state. And I do want to ask you all if you think Israel is an apartheid state. I want to start with
Quickly,
Daxios.
no, of course not.
Okay, so Rafi says of course not. What do you think? Let's just go around real quick. Just a lightning round here.
Just very easily, no. We have Arabs in our parliaments. Like, no, we're not.
Okay, not an apartheid state. Saxium, apartheid state?
I think it's a reasonable conversation to have. I wouldn't say explicitly yes though.
Dodging, weaseling the question. Okay, Mono, what do you think?
It's definitely partially.
Partially apartheid. Okay, Jason.
No.
No. Go.
Nope.
No. Quibbles.
if you believe in a one-state solution,
Yes or
which I
no?
do not. I want to give the answer. It's okay. In Israel proper,
Okay,
the answer is no.
Weasley
In the
not
West
answered.
Bank-
Okay, Silver.
You don't know anything about
Fuck
Jews
you!
if you
Let
think
me
we
answer
can
the
answer
question.
questions
Quibbles
in
is
one
studying
order.
too much Talmud.
Okay, if you're asking in terms of Israel proper, the answer is flatly no. It is not an ethno-state. If you're asking in terms
Apartheid.
of the West
Apartheid, not
Bank,
ethno.
if you believe, sorry, it's not apartheid. If you're asking in terms of the West Bank,
Yeah,
if
sure.
you believe
Those are
in a
questions.
one-state solution, then it is arguably apartheid in the West Bank. If you believe in a one-state solution, however, believing in a one-state solution is fucking stupid. No one should believe in a one-state solution, and therefore, because it should be understood as being on a trajectory towards being an independent country, it is not apartheid. It is instead an occupation that is, I think, defensible given the circumstance, but obviously regrettable.
Okay,
It took
Silver?
an hour and
What?
15 minutes to activate the quibbles.
Yeah. Go ahead, Silver. What's your answer? Apartheid state? Yes or no?
No.
No,
Two
okay.
letters. No.
Rafi, you had a really strong reaction to that. I want to hear your reaction. Go ahead. Now you can elaborate.
I have all these issues with the way that we like smuggle in all these connotations to terms, and we use certain words that really have no application. All these words
That
kind of
people don't
start
know
to
what
become
they
meaningless
actually
when we
mean.
talk. Yeah, they start to become meaningless when we talk about Israel. So I guess we can distinguish. So we have Israel proper. Is it an apartheid state? I guess if your IQ is in the single digits, maybe you could say that. We have Arabs in our parliaments. We have equal rights for everyone here. Obviously, we have like economic differences between specific groups. We have issues. There's always going to be racism in any country. There are things we can work on and improve. That's not apartheid. That's like normal civil society. In the territories that are disputed, I think that we can make a case that obviously people don't have the same rights there, especially because of the settlement projects where we have Israeli citizens and non-Israeli citizens living in the same area. But again, a military occupation is not apartheid, and we can address the necessity of the military occupation as a separate question. But to call it apartheid is just stupid, and it's very clear that what we're doing is trying to maliciously smuggle in all of the connotations of apartheid and oppression that people face under those systems into the conversation. And that's actually why, to go back to the ethno-state very quickly, I think that's what happens, that people, when they hear ethno-state, they hear apartheid. I think that it's possible to have an ethno-state without apartheid, and it's possible to have apartheid without an ethno-state. But these concepts need to be separated. We need
As
to
soon as you hear
disambiguate all
apartheid,
of
you
these
already
words.
think like the worst.
Well,
That's what it was designed. That was what the talking point was designed to do.
So Staxium's and I think Mono, I believe, were like, yes, it kind of is, and I want to hear your arguments for this.
I think for me, the settlements are the
if the citizen
part, because it's not necessarily a military occupation. You have citizens there, or just civilians, not even citizens. Whichever way you want to address them, just
Right,
people
but can we
living
acknowledge
there.
that's a separate discussion then? That saying that when someone says Israel is an apartheid state, right? The very clear intent there is that Israel is doing something horrific, and we need to dismantle that system.
Well, what
Right?
I
saying that
specifically said was
the
system
West
of the
Bank,
settlements.
Judea,
That's what I
no,
meant.
but that's
what
yeah,
I mean.
right. So
I
that's what I'm
don't know
saying, we have
what
to be
people.
specific.
I don't know what
When
people.
people say Israel is an apartheid state, it's very clear what
give
they're saying.
me just a moment.
Thank God
when people like in general
Mono.
talk about it, they might mean something. But we're in a panel. In this panel, I think people know specifically exactly what I meant.
I don't actually. When someone says they think that Israel is an apartheid state, I assume they're talking about Israel.
No, I said partially, and then I said it's the settlements which are the part that I mean is
right. No,
that's
apartheid. Right, but then I'm saying why even use the word? Why even use the word? Why not just discuss the justification of the occupation? Because that's really what you have a problem with. You don't have a right. For you, the problem is that there's an occupation. If the occupation ended, no problem, right?
I guess what I'm trying to say is you feel really comfortable with the word occupation, but I think when it comes to occupation of civilians and citizens of Israel, like that, like Palestinians, I think that conversation of apartheid is at least a little bit warranted. So when you ask me that question, I'll say yeah, kind of, but I don't want to give a full-fledged yes, because I don't want to just say, oh, Israel is an apartheid state in that very broad definition that I think we all agree is probably not accurate. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I guess would we call every colonial or imperial state an apartheid state in that case?
Could you repeat that?
Was England the UK, were they an apartheid state until they ended all their colonies? Yeah, I don't understand. Like,
how are we defining apartheid? Can we just get a quick?
Yeah, can someone pull the definition?
Sure.
Exactly.
The definition, the colloquial definition,
specifically someone who believes that it's an apartheid.
Well, I can just really quick. A policy or system of segregation or discrimination on grounds of race.
Okay, is that something that the people who
or segregation on other grounds other than race? So you have a gender apartheid or something.
So Staxium, are you comfortable with that as a definition?
I think that segregation, I think that's a fair conversation. That
Wait,
members
but
of-
the sorry,
Do
the
you
very
think that
clear.
it's-
It's not. I guess.
Wait,
Did
let
say
me
this.
finish
The
my question
implication
to
is
them.
that
Let
it's
me
citizens,
finish.
right?
No,
It has to be
Rafi,
applied to
I'm-
citizens, not
I can't hear
non-citizens.
either of you guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Rafi,
yeah.
shh.
No
Okay.
one's everyone's
Do you-
talking over each other, right? And I know
Okay.
like you say it's a Jewish thing, but on this panel, right, we're gonna do the WhickTV thing.
No, it's an
we've
Israeli
colonized
thing,
this
I think.
panel.
Oh
Power
God!
sign.
Okay.
Am I a settle?
so-
Wait, am I being apartheided right now? Is this what's happening? Am I being a second-class citizen?
Quick, you're supporting
If
a
you
apartheid.
get a actually no, that joke's gonna be too dark. Never mind.
Oh,
Okay,
now
so
you
Staxium.
started it. Yeah. Well, no, if it's tossed, don't do it. But
No, it's not
so
TOS.
Staxium.
It's not
But
TOS. No.
so again, I'll read
Okay.
it again. Policy or system of segregation or discrimination on grounds of race. A segregation on grounds other than race can also be considered apartheid, at least by the dictionary.
So when you're
definition.
talking about that segregation, are you saying that in terms of the West Bank, or are you saying that in terms of Israel proper? And if you're talking about Israel
No,
proper,
no. The
in what
settlement.
sense? Exclusively in
Correct.
in West Bank.
Correct.
Okay. And so when you're talking about the West Bank component,
Mhm.
what is it that you have an issue with? Are you concerned with Area C, the military control? Or are you concerned about the inclusion of a growing number of Jews living in settlements?
I'll be honest. I don't feel that well equipped to answer that question, and maybe that's just I'm not specifically familiar enough.
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that question.
Here's the way I think about it, right? Because
Mhm.
okay, Area A is entirely controlled by the Palestinian Authority, both militarily and civilly. Area B is simply civilly controlled by the Palestinian Authority, but is not militarily controlled. And Area C is both civilly and militarily controlled by the IDF, by the Israel. Now, the first thing that I'll flag is that the majority of territory is Area C, but the majority of the population is Area A, right? The majority of the cities, the places that people actually live, is under the control of the Palestinian Authority. So that's the first component that I think is worth noting when we're trying to flag this, right? But the second component that I think is worth thinking about is that, okay, so is it segregation or is it a different country? Because if you're thinking of it as on trajectory towards being a different country, yeah, go for it.
Well, no, that's a fair question, but definitionally, right now, it is not its own country, right? Like Palestine is not a universally recognized country. So if it
But then
were,
don't
I
call it an
think-
occupation.
We're not a universally recognized
My-
country either. Like nearly half the world doesn't
my
recognize us as a
frustration-
country.
Wait, recognize
doesn't
what?
make
Israel?
sense.
Hold
Israel,
on,
yeah,
no,
nearly
wait,
half
wait,
of the
real
world
quick.
doesn't
Rafi made a
recognize
statement. You're
Israel.
saying, Rafi, and I heard this is what
Yeah,
I heard. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Quite a lot of the world does not.
It
I mean, if
doesn't-
we're going to go by, there are many states that actually do recognize the Palestinians as their own states. By the way, the Palestinians are the ones who say they aren't a state. Many people do recognize them, but many people also don't recognize us as a state. So I think getting into these discussions of who is in a state, I mean, it's a little bit, it's pointless. It's besides the point.
The point that I'm trying to parse here is that it doesn't make sense to simultaneously say that it's segregation and also say that it's an occupation. Only one of those things can be true, right? It can't
I agree.
be both.
I generally lean towards
Yeah.
segregation. I think segregation makes a little bit more sense because Palestine, I wouldn't consider it its own country because I generally defer to the UN.
Okay, so
Well,
then in
I think
that
that's a mistake.
case, yeah,
What
first
was
of all, I
that?
think that's a mistake because I think
The-
that
the-
we're much
I would say
closer-
the UN is probably one of the least reliable. I would say maybe like
Sure.
Gaza Health Ministry is at the bottom, and then UN is like a few centimeters above them when it comes to unreliable.
I think a
sources
bit
and
If we're
more
confidence.
than
trying-
that. Come on.
if we're trying to think about
I mean,
how
the
we
UN
can
pretty much
actually-
parrots whatever they're told by Fatah and Hamas, right? Any independent verification is just totally
Yeah.
reliant on Fatah and Hamas. So I just the UN is functionally a propaganda arm at this point.
Not to mention the
Fatah and Hamas.
plurality. The plurality
trying
of
to think
countries
about
represented there.
if we're trying to think
Yeah,
about how
sorry.
we can get to a point where we're able to see an Israel and a Palestine at peace, I think
Mhm.
it has to come from a starting point of recognizing the fact that, as Rafi was saying, that Israel has to be Jewish majority, and still nonetheless a democracy, still nonetheless a parliamentary system which has the inclusion of Palestinians who are the minority there as genuine members of the society, but that it has to be a Jewish majority. And similarly, that Palestine, if it's going to be free, also has to be a Palestinian majority, perhaps with a Jewish minority, but again, Palestinian majority.
Well, let's
and I
tackle
think
that for a
that-
minute, if I may. Just another lightning round here, right? And
Well, if I can just finish the point.
finish your point, but then I have another lightning
Okay.
round. So please
So
hold
that
off on your
starting
responses.
point, I think. So that starting point, I think, has to be the starting point for those of us who genuinely do believe in my case, a 3-state, because I don't think that West Bank and Gaza should be one country, but either a 3 or 2-state solution compared to the 1-state solution. And if that's the thing that we believe, then talking about it as apartheid, talking about it as segregation, I think just fundamentally fails to understand the situation as what it is, which is an occupation. And we can talk about why it's being occupied and the problems that result from it being occupied, and also the reasons why that occupation may be necessary, not just in the West Bank, but I think increasingly in Gaza. But that's a different question than whether or not it's one country, whether or not it's segregation. Sorry.
You know what?
continue.
I'll
No, it's fine.
concede my point, and I'll say
before you go too far, I gotta jump in here because this is interesting and I want to talk about it, and I think we deserve to have this conversation. There's going to be 2 questions I'm going to ask. One is a lightning round. We're going to go around again, quick as you can. Quibbles, I'm looking at you, right? And then
I'm gonna
the
be super
second
fast
question.
this time, Wick.
the
Super
stuff-
fast.
You
It's
have
gonna be a
7
one-word.
minutes.
Okay,
Okay,
well,
podcast,
you're still talking. You're not letting me answer the question. So, ask the question. So, the second question is going to be the general question that I want the actual discussion on. Okay. So I guess the first question is: do we believe that Palestine, right, should exist as a state, right, alongside of Israel? Just real quick, Palestine exists as a state alongside Israel. Go. What do you think? Yes or
Wick,
no?
you're gonna be so proud
Most
of me. I have one
definitely,
word.
yes.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Jason.
Oh, sorry, I can't tell who you're pointing to.
No,
yeah,
Jason.
Oh yeah, you're just like
Yeah,
pointing.
yeah.
I didn't. Know
I get you. I
Yeah.
get you.
You're pointing at between quibbles.
Okay, yes or
and-
no?
I know you-
Yes or no? Palestine.
Yes.
Mono.
yes.
Staxiums.
Yes.
Silver.
Sure.
Quibbles.
You're gonna be so proud of me. One word. Yes.
You made like
Aren't you
7
proud?
words
Yeah,
to
I
say
know.
one word. Okay. And then Rafi, do you think
Let's
Palestine?
go.
Absolutely yes.
Absolutely yes. Then the discussion question here is: what is the biggest obstacle right now to Palestine becoming a state?
Hamas.
Radicalization.
Hamas,
Just
on its
Oh,
face.
I would say
Lightning
Hamas.
round, lightning
Hamas is
round, lightning
okay.
round. Do another lightning
Hamas
round.
is absolutely a cop out.
lightning
It's
round.
the fundamental radicalization of population on both sides, but especially among Palestinian society. It's because I having been in the military, we're not just fighting Hamas. We're fighting dozens of these groups. They pop up like every other day. If we crush Hamas, there's just going to be another one. And it's very, very sad to say, but the occupation that exists right now is probably the worst possible thing that could have ever happened. Because it would have been better to either have no occupation or to have a deep occupation. But Oslo, I think, was one of the biggest mistakes that has happened in the history of our conflict, in that it brought in a government that had no intention of ever reaching peace to educate and take control of their own people and just completely radicalize them over generations. And I think that's what
Do you
we've
feel
seen.
that the Palestinians are radicalized beyond
No, there's no such thing as beyond, but we're talking about, I full-throatedly support a Palestinian state. I believe that every single group of people has the right to self-determination if they desire it and if they express a need for it. But I think that the Palestinian state, just if we're talking practicalities, it will not exist for at least 2 generations now because of what's happened.
Not as long as we still
so-
fear for another October 7th.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the kinds of things that are taught in schools in the Palestinian territories.
Oh, we see the
But I mean-
videos and Far 4 and all that.
Yeah, they
bullshit.
frequently have math
not
problems
just
that include how many Jews did the Shaheed kill if his vest went off and there were 10 Jews in the room, but 2 of them walked out first, right? I mean, it sounds like a joke, but it's these are actually in their textbooks. And I think that fundamentally, it's very sad to say this, and I want to be very.
They have shows for children that have this propaganda,
Yeah,
and
we've all
that's
seen that.
yeah,
And
that's
I want to be very
insane.
nuanced when I say this, but what's necessary is fundamentally a deep occupation. It doesn't necessarily have to be by Israel, but there must be a total.
I know a lot of
remaking
people
of the
want
education system.
Yeah, I know a lot of people want to
children are
talk
not
on this,
raised
but I
to be
have to
violent.
interrogate that a little bit because what do you mean by a deep occupation?
So when I say a deep occupation, right now what we have is a military occupation. We have security forces that control security, that do what our government feels is necessary to enforce a secure status quo, right, where Jews are not being killed, etc. Okay, and that's an occupation. I think that that's horrible because it doesn't really change anything. People are continuing to be radicalized. Each round of violence further radicalizes people. So the occupation right now accomplishes nothing other than preventing most of the attacks. But I'm saying in terms of all it does, the occupation now is preserve the status quo. And I think that's horrific. When we talk about it, when I say a deep occupation, I mean an occupation that penetrates into the civil layers of society. It's not purely a security-based occupation,
So you
but
would
it's an occupation perhaps of other Arab states or some kind of joint effort between
Wait.
many different states. But
He didn't say it has to be Israel. He said it
yeah,
could be any.
I very
it could
specifically
be
said it
anybody
doesn't
else.
need to be Israel, but there needs to be a fundamental dismantling of the system of education that currently exists in the Palestinian territories.
even the Palestinian
the UN is
Authority.
failed.
Just real quick,
Because
stop,
it's
stop, stop,
built
stop.
to
Let me
radicalize.
stop, please. Let me interrogate this because I'm very curious. The Palestinian Authority would also be dismantled in this deep
Absolutely.
occupation.
We need to radically invest in the future of Palestinians. We need to give them options. We need to make sure that they have choices in their lives. We need to make sure that they have the potential to grow financially, to improve their lives. And one of the first steps of that is that children can't be taught that every bad thing that happens in their life is because of a Jew across the border. As
Okay.
long as they believe that
UN
Jews are
ain't
responsible
gonna
for
do
everything
it, so
bad,
like
there will never
whose
be
job
peace.
is that?
I want Goats to go. So Goats, you asked a question, and I think it deserves an answer. The UN isn't going to do that. So who is?
So whose job is that? Like who's
I
gonna
think
do that?
it's very sad, but it's ours because no one
Yep.
else is going to help us. We have to do this.
Exactly.
We have to invest our own financial, our capital, our effort into making sure that there's a future where our children are not going to be killing.
You
each
know
other.
that's what, but you do know that what that will be painted as, right? You understand what that would be
Absolutely,
seen
I understand.
as.
I understand, but that's what I'm saying. That we're in a situation. You know, there's a sanitization of war and of conflict in the West. For most of the West, since after World War II, conflict is something that happens very far away from you. It's not something that poses an existential threat. Both peoples right now, both Palestinians, feel an existential threat. Okay, I don't want to get into arguments over who's more justified, over because we can go like a million years talking about who ought to be the bigger victim in the situation, and it doesn't even matter. The point is that right now Israel has power. We have the upper hand militarily. And we need to make sure that we're doing what is necessary to ensure that both Palestinians and Jews can have a future. Because I see this conflict going one of two ways. Either we do what's necessary to bring peace and to de-radicalize the Palestinian population, which, by the way, because there are probably people I'm not really following the chat, but people that are talking, they're not that radicalized. Polling as of like a few days ago is that 70% of the Palestinian population supports armed resistance against Israel. Okay. So it's like that's not a viable place where we can have two states side by side. If 70% of Canadians wanted to go and kill Americans, like the situation would not continue in the way that it is. So we unfortunately are in a situation where either we do what is necessary, even if it's not pretty, to achieve a future where Jews and Palestinians live side by side in peace, or one of these two peoples get genocided. I mean, I don't see another way where this conflict ends.
I think the first thing that we need to recognize is that the status quo is not acceptable.
That's just procrastination, the status quo.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the status quo is not acceptable. And that needs to be just like the first statement that you make before you make whatever next statement you're going to make. The status quo is unacceptable. And that is true in the West Bank. And it's particularly true in Gaza, as we saw on the 7th. And as we saw, frankly, on the 6th, as we saw prior to the 7th, right? Because when we think about, right now, there's a lot of people who are talking on the purportedly pro-Palestine side of things in the West about how horrible Israel's response has been to the Palestinians living in Gaza. And what they're not recognizing is that the reason that the numbers are so high in terms of the number of Gazans who have been killed is because explicitly, as a decision of war, Hamas is intentionally hiding all of their stuff and hiding themselves behind civilians and specifically behind children.
I'm pretty sure they also keep civilians like.
You don't even have to say it so indirectly. It's a policy to sacrifice their citizens.
It is a policy. Yeah, that's a policy of theirs.
Of martyrdom.
So it's not even just a policy that they're doing in terms of a way of protecting themselves, but also it's a policy that they're doing as a way of wielding their influence and wielding those deaths to have the exact response that people who aren't particularly invested or focused on this conflict are giving, which is the response of, oh my God, the IDF just killed a bunch of people, as though that wasn't the explicit point of what Hamas was doing, as though that wasn't explicitly what they were trying to have happen, right? And so the first part that we need to get to, if we're going to get to a place of peace, is that the West needs to grow the fuck up. the West needs to like understand like what exactly Hamas is doing and how exactly they are a part of that process of the terrorists and how they are at fault and they are being useful to those terrorists, right? So that's the first part.
Wait, hold on. I want to push back on this. So
Yeah.
what is happening here, right? To the normie, the person who isn't invested, who isn't involved, who doesn't know. They see pictures and they are horrific, and
Yeah.
it is a tragedy
And it
of
is horrific,
children,
absolutely.
5,000, I think, at this point, having been killed
Yep.
by Israeli bombs.
Yep.
And
Wick,
do
if
you
I can
think
ask,
that-
sorry, I need to interrupt.
Wait,
If
the
I can
question's
ask,
for me.
please don't quote any specific numbers because they're all unverified.
Of course, fair,
They're
actually.
all
Okay, that's fair.
a lot
But
of
I'm
people
just
died, and
I'm
it's
just
horrible.
speaking as the
I know, I
normie. This
don't
is the
want-
numbers they're hearing. Okay, so the
Fine.
normie, they're hearing this, they're seeing
died and it's
photos of
horrible.
this, right? And I'm not an expert. I'm not going to qualify any of these numbers, but let's, for the purpose of this conversation, please.
Yep.
So again, they see this happening. They have an empathetic response. I don't want to see kids dying. No one wants to see a child die, right? And an Israeli bomb comes and kills them, and the numbers are pretty staggering. And you think,
And the problem is
wow,
that they're playing into the hands of the
you think
terrorists.
that's a
The
Yes.
blame is
That
even
is explicit.
misplaced.
The goal,
I mean,
like, okay, this is a basic like principle of the warfare that Hamas is engaging in. As a tactic of war, they know that, and this part is completely accurate, that if they went head to head directly against the IDF, that Hamas would lose. Hamas knows that, the IDF knows that, everyone knows that. That's just true. Right.
Mhm.
And so therefore they are deciding as a tactic of war to be engaged in this type of warfare where instead of going 1-to-1, they are wielding these things that are not conventional weapons, that are instead that they're using as shields, humans, children, right? Specifically Palestinian children, and that specifically they are trying to wield that for propagandistic purposes. And so the reason that they're doing this, and when we play into that as the West, when we as the West are constantly focusing on those numbers, are constantly focusing on the number of captives that they're holding currently underground, forcing grandmothers to walk miles and miles and miles underground
It's
in
lost.
tunnels, right? That is explicitly playing into the hands of the terrorists. That is explicitly why they are doing it, so that we have the exact response that we have, and so that it becomes more and more difficult for the IDF to do the thing that is required if we're going to move forward. The reality is that the only way that we get to a 2 or 3 state solution, the only way that we get to an actual lasting piece of justice is if we kill everyone who's a part of Hamas, is if we manage to take them out. And so
again, to
they're
push back on
doing
that, though,
this.
to push back on
Yeah.
that, right? Other people would say no. The fact that Hamas is wielding these weapons is why we need a ceasefire, right? There's millions.
Yeah, they're fucking stupid.
They're
Let
cowards,
me
honestly.
finish.
You
Let me
can't man
finish.
up.
Let me
It's not
finish,
even
and
that
we'll
they're
get
cowards,
to
they're
it.
just fucking stupid.
Stop. Let me finish, and then we'll get to it, right? And you can call them whatever you like, and you can counter the point. But they are calling for a ceasefire now because the lives of those people being killed now, right? Regardless of why, regardless of whose fault it is, these are people, right, who would be alive if Israel just stopped, right? They would not be dead if Israel stopped the bombs, if Israel stopped going after Hamas, if they sat down, negotiated a peace, etc. So what do you say to that? Because that's a very powerful argument that is winning. Because Rafi said at the very beginning of this conversation, right, that even more important than what happens when the bullets fly on the ground, right, is perhaps arguably the words and the ways we talk about it, right? And I don't think, unless any of you want to disagree with me, want to take the position that IDF is winning that war, because they're not. They're absolutely getting bodied in that war.
If you want a ceasefire, if Hamas genuinely was interested in a ceasefire, here's what they would do. One, they would not have a bunch of innocent civilians held in underground tunnels, right? They would hand back all the hostages. That's the first thing that they would do. The second thing that they would do, if they actually believed that they wanted to have a 2-state solution, if they actually wanted to have freedom for both Palestinians and also Israelis, they would stop shooting rockets at innocent civilians in Tel Aviv and across Israel as a whole. Okay, that's the second thing they do. The third thing that they would do is that they would have elections. They haven't had elections since Literally, the
2006.
early 2000s, right? Literally, it has been 17 fucking years since they have an election, right? So if they actually wanted to get there, they could do those things. They could do the kinds of things. They would, for example, stop pulling up literal pipes, water pipes that are trying, like people are constantly talking about the water crisis of Gaza, and rightly so, because the water crisis in Gaza is horrible, but it is the explicit and a direct responsibility of Gaza, who is pulling up water pipes as Israel is, despite living in a desert, despite
Or
themselves having water
building
security
tunnels,
issues, going
building
out of their
tunnels
way.
using the humanitarian aid that
They're
they're
going out of
getting.
their way. They're going out of their way to rip up water pipes in order to use those water pipes literally as rockets to shoot at children in Tel Aviv. And
I think
while they
Instead
do it,
of
they're hiding
trying to-
behind Palestinian children.
Okay, I want to
So
hear some other
instead
people
of
they are
as
the
well.
working
ones
on
Hold on,
their
that
own
hold on.
have there be a
economy.
ceasefire.
I want to
When
hear
people- when people-
Quibbles. I understand
Yeah.
that you're very passionate this, but I want to hear other people's opinion on the ceasefire as
Sure,
well.
go for it.
Okay, and I want to just kind of go around. I know Goats wanted to say something on ceasefire. Why do you oppose? Like, it sounds like you oppose a ceasefire, Goat. Is that true?
Well, I think the talk about the ceasefire is basically just putting all responsibility on Israel. It's like, I mean, come on, there are other players in this game. I mean, why the hell is it only up to us? Okay, why is all the
Well, the
responsibility
argument would
upon
be
us?
that you have
Okay,
the majority of the power in the situation, right? That you, if
I
Israel,
wouldn't
to be
say
clear,
so. I wouldn't say so. I think Hamas has an insane amount of power with the fact that they have our hostages, okay? They have insane amount of power. And if they didn't have that many hostages, maybe we could reach a ceasefire. Maybe it was like the situation was less severe than it is right now, but
I don't
you
think it would
know,
be
I
acceptable.
think the blame is misplaced, okay? Because the talk about ceasefire is just like, okay, that's just Israel's fault. Israel, again, it's Israel. We're doing everything to the opposed, like to the conquered, like Palestinians, and we're the bad guys, okay? And it's supposed to be our responsibility. I don't know. It's just the talks about. 1 second. Yeah. So the talks about responsibility towards Israel. 1 second. Hold on.
take your time.
Okay,
We'll get
continue.
back to you. We'll get back to
Um,
you. Jason, ceasefire or no?
Definitely, absolutely not. I think that the double standard imposed on Israel compared to any other country in the entire world is absolutely baffling. The fact that we are not only, there's like the concept of, that there are laws of war and that there are, war may be immoral, but you can do your best to not, to minimize collateral damage, right? But what is being asked of Israel is to value the innocent citizens of another country over their own. That we can that the
Well,
hostages,
just to be clear, they
they
do.
just huh?
They do.
And I know that
already.
they do, but this is at a level that is unparalleled. That you should
But I
be
just want
able,
to clarify,
yeah,
like before you move forward, like
yeah,
Israel tomorrow has the capacity to carpet bomb all of Gaza. If they wanted to do that, they could do it, and it would mean that many fewer IDF soldiers were going to die. But instead, they're doing this thing that is definitely going to result in many more IDF soldiers dying, and they're doing it explicitly because, unlike Hamas, they actually do care about innocent Gazan civilians. But I'm sorry, continue.
yeah. They absolutely, I absolutely think that they do. But I think that so maybe I should rephrase. Not just that they're being asked to put the lives of civilians on the other side above theirs, but to put it so far above theirs to an entirely different degree that any other country would ever be asked to do. That 230, 240 hostages, many of whom we still don't even know if they're alive. The Red Cross and the United Nations has completely and abjectly failed in this conflict. The fact that we just have to not, Israel just has to not know. We just won't know, and people,
And
people
nobody
can
cares.
stop dying, and nobody cares, and no one will ever, we may never know. Hamas doesn't have to commit to anything. They don't have to commit to giving back any of them, and we still have
Nobody
to.
takes them accountable.
Can I jump in real quick? I think what needs
Yeah,
to
go
happen,
ahead.
what needs to happen, in my opinion, is that no, we can't have a ceasefire. Obviously, we need, and also after we need to stay there until we dismantle the overwhelming power Hamas has over Gaza. I'll be talking about Gaza specifically, and then either only Israel or every other significant enough power that agrees to it needs to help reform Gaza into a place where Palestinians and any kind of Arab that lives there can have like just a normal human life with education, with food and water. This is not going to happen ever under a
Among
government quote
terrorist
unquote like Hamas.
organizations.
This is not going to happen, and we in Israel cannot afford to keep providing them the impetus to do another October 7th. This can't happen. This is our incentive, but also this is like, if anyone cares about Palestinians and Arab people in the Middle East, they should be pro us dismantling the power of Hamas, and then do whatever we can to reform
Yep.
this
Yeah,
place
and-
that has
and
been
Israel,
like
just real
a
quick,
temple
just-
for murder.
Yeah, just
basically.
real quick. Israel will never be free. Or, I'm sorry, Palestine will never be free. And Israel, too. But Palestine will never be free while Hamas exists, right? And if you are out in
Or
the
any
streets
other
chanting...
such
Or
organization.
any other
yeah.
terrorist
Yeah, I
organization
understand.
that is in
If you're
power.
out in the streets chanting Free Palestine, but you are not asking for the dismantling of things, of groups like Hamas, you don't give a shit about Palestinians.
Not
You
only
just
that,
don't.
the
You're
reform.
virtue signaling.
After that,
You're
just
yeah,
virtue
you're
signaling.
using
if they
Palestinians
dismantle
as
Hamas
pawns.
and
So-
go away,
for your
it's
gain.
just gonna happen again.
And
Yeah,
300
in that
bits from, just
scenario-
real quick, let me make money here. 300, as Jews, I know you understand. No, that's a joke, please don't. 300,
Alright,
300
I'm
bits
making my
from
joke.
Feder
I'm making
Methodist.
my
300 bits from Feder Methodist. Here, take my shekels. Thank you. And gang, if you want to give me money, if you want to ask these people questions, if you have comments and things,
Give him money.
super chats, throw me bits my way. All these things would be great, right? Like bits, super chats, subs, all these things. I can't do this for free. I do need money to stay afloat. And so please, if you like the stream, please support the stream. If you value these kinds of
Do it.
conversations. Anyway, but so Mono, I'll let you finish, but then I want to ask everyone else about the ceasefire too. So
No, I think I finished. Like,
Okay,
we can't
great.
be expected to go out of there and because even if we dismantle Hamas and we just pull off, I mean, the area is so radicalized. No matter who caused it, obviously both Hamas and Israel caused it for many years. But we Israel, at least Israel, has the responsibility to make a difference now. It can't go on.
Staxium's ceasefire.
I think it generally, I mean, ceasefire with no other, like, it's a way to maintain your moral, like, high ground to call for a ceasefire. I think that, I mean, we've had dozens of ceasefires between Israel and
Yep.
Palestine in the past, and it's it's just a continuation of the same violence. Like, that's not an actual
Yeah, it's a
road to peace.
procrastination.
That's not, yeah. So any sort of solution is going to be is going to have to be a little bit more thoughtful and yeah, I don't know. A ceasefire is just, it's such an easy thing to throw around, but I don't think it's going to solve anything. I think it's just delaying just another attack.
Okay.
Oh, also,
Sylvan.
I would also say,
Oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
quickly. You can ceasefire, just give us every single hostage. It's
Well,
actually pretty
At,
simple.
at a
no,
minimum.
Whoa.
At a
But I
minimum.
will say is they're
It's
negotiating.
pretty simple.
On
Sylvan,
the
yeah, well,
ceasefire,
ceasefire or no?
Well, no, for one. But I don't. Whenever I hear ceasefire on its face, I'm just like, that's so foolish. Like, what are you even saying right now? So the only thing I think Israel would get out of the ceasefire is like that little bit of extra like moral standing, but it's like it doesn't even matter.
Not
Like
really.
how it doesn't matter how moral Israel is right now.
We
and-
have
and-
the moral high ground.
Yeah, we do, but like no one really cares. And then what's that give Hamas more time to do? Just like prepare, rearm, refit. Like,
Well,
it's, on
then
its face, I
again,
think it's ridiculous.
it's giving like then again, like, just, well, for Palestinians, Palestinian refugees in the south of Gaza, I think a ceasefire is a very attractive thing. Yes,
Absolutely.
like they get,
Well, it
Oh,
makes
yeah,
sense.
that's
Why
what
you
I'm getting
want
at
it.
they
next.
get,
I think
wait,
we have
they
to.
get more humanitarian like support and everything. They have like they can take a deep breath, I guess. Okay, so it's just not just the point of the ceasefire is not. Let's not focus only on how it benefits or doesn't benefit Israel. There's another side in this conflict too that benefits from a ceasefire. That's why I think lots of people
Sure.
are advocating for a ceasefire. Okay, because there are people that are like homeless in the south of Gaza that are like that need humanitarian help and they need a ceasefire. Okay, so
Yeah, for those people, I
Israel
wish they could
has
get the
done that
reprieve that they're
unilaterally in a number
due
of
or owed. But like,
I
I
don't
just
think
don't know
it's
what I don't know
legit
what
to,
to tell
like,
them. Like,
Why
you should do
cancel
something.
this?
You should
Just
take it in your own
acknowledge
hands
that
to
this
end
side
this.
exists. Just acknowledge that this side exists. You can't deny its existence.
No, you're right. But
I mean,
the solution to that is a short-term ceasefire in particular components, but not the totality of Gaza, which is exactly what unilaterally, just the one side, Israel has done repeatedly in order to help try to get people to go south. But the problem is that explicitly, Hamas is not just telling people, but forcing people to stay in northern Gaza because they want to use them as human
yes,
shields.
but that's not what I'm saying. I'm just
think that,
saying
look,
that
guys,
when you give when you're talking about a ceasefire, you're forgetting why are people advocating for it, and it's not just like
I think that
to harm
unfortunately most
Israel.
of the
Okay,
calls,
I'm
most of the
just saying
calls for
acknowledge the fact that
These are
there
calls for permanent
there's
ceasefires.
another side in this conflict. Just
Yeah.
acknowledge it. Don't
No,
deny
and
it.
I agree with you.
Just
I
think
agree with
about.
you.
Just say that it's
My
there. Okay.
I 100% agree with you.
Goat,
And
I
my
think I
frustration
fundamentally
is that
disagree.
I want
when
Rafi
I
to go.
think about
Hold
There's
on,
an issue that
Rafi
the-
hasn't
the-
got to speak on this yet. So Rafi,
when
go
I
ahead.
think about
Goat,
this issue,
there's
of
a big
ceasefire,
issue that there's a big issue that
this
all of
component-
the
Wait,
Quibbles,
let me finish.
stop.
She
No,
was
Quibbles.
talking to me.
Rafi hasn't gone yet. Rafi hasn't gone yet. Rafi hasn't even answered the question.
Yeah.
Rafi gets to go.
There's a
and
big
then we
issue that
can
we're all talking, or I mean, most people that are talking about a ceasefire are talking about it with zero military understanding of what that means. Someone who calls for a ceasefire, I'm going to say this and then I'll explain it. Calling for a ceasefire, you're calling for more Palestinian death. Okay, you are actively and explicitly calling for more Palestinians to die in the course of this conflict. A decade ago, I fought in Gaza. I was there. Okay, we're back there again today. And the idea that a ceasefire is going to do anything other than prolong the conflict
I know.
and
I'm
have
just
more
saying
people
that that's
die
how they
is
see
insane.
it.
I understand, and that's what I'm trying to. That's what I'm trying to say.
It
That
doesn't
they
have
see it
actual
wrong.
benefit. I'm not
It's
saying
not
it
actual
actually
benefit.
has a
It has
benefit.
actual
I'm
harm.
just saying that yeah, okay.
A ceasefire,
But that's not how
allows
everybody
Hamas.
sees it.
Right.
Other
But
people
I
see it
understand,
in
Yeah, we
a
know, but
different
we
way.
allows
understand
Hamas.
their statements, and we understand where
You
they come
don't
from.
say if you don't acknowledge it. It doesn't
We
seem
do.
like you
That's what I'm saying, but there's
understand.
nothing
That's
to
exactly what I'm
You know,
saying.
someone can be insane, and I'll acknowledge that they're insane, but I'm not going to validate it. They're wrong. There's no worth to what they're
I
saying.
just
It is
think
not a
in a
worth
talk about
while
ceasefire,
opinion.
you should have
No, but
like a point of
that's right.
view of the other side as well. Okay,
That's fine.
that's
they
all
have
I'm
short-term
saying.
and
And there
What I
wasn't one
understand,
until I said it.
It's fine. I understand
I think
why
it
they
is
say
right
it, but
here.
the issue is that if Hamas has time to fortify, then the conflict
Okay,
becomes
that's
long.
not
And
the
the
problem.
biggest factor that
not-
determines how
Rafi,
many
you're just-
civilians are
we've
going to
already
die
heard
in a
that.
conflict is how
We all
long the
agree.
conflict
I
is.
don't know why you're
Yeah, we all
repeating it.
agree.
We all agree. The
We all
point is
agree.
that what Goat is saying here, I think, is correct. That there is a rightful focus on the fact that the truth is that Hamas is horrible for Israel, but Hamas is a lot worse for Gazans than it is for Israelis. And the truth is that when we're talking about the very real problems that are being faced, again, not just post October 7th, but prior to October 7th, as a result of Hamas terrorist dictatorship ruling over the Gazan people, the result of that is that, of course, they're experiencing this horrible situation. And yes, Israel has in the past and will in the future made these decisions that are designed to protect Palestinian people, Gazan people, at the cost of their own safety, at the cost of their own soldiers, at the cost of a lot of things. And so that's why they've done these unilateral partial ceasefires of particular components of corridors to help try to get people south. But the problem is that, like, there's only so much you can do when Hamas is explicitly, sometimes at gunpoint and always, at least publicly, stating that people should stay in the north and that people shouldn't flee because they want them to be used as human shields.
Can I address the human shields? Because I do.
I'm just against. Okay, I'm just against one-sided conversations. Okay,
No, I agree with you.
That was
No.
my whole point. Okay,
You're
And no,
exasperated by
I
what
agree
the other
with
side
your
perceives, I think.
like the way we like we talked about the ceasefire was just completely one-sided, and
No. I agree.
But
I
some
agree that
conversations are. I'm sorry.
okay?
Some
We should have the
conversations are
acknowledgement.
one-sided. Right?
Okay.
If someone tells me 1 + 1 is 3, it doesn't. There's no conversation to be had.
It sounds like we all mostly agree on
this
this.
is-
Just to
Well, no, it sounds
divert
like
the
Goat, I'm just-
conversation.
You can't take
It sounds
it
like
as
multiple
Okay, we're
people
getting
are actually
trapped.
actively
granted.
disagreeing.
We're getting
telling
stuck.
me that we all agree.
Stop. We're getting stuck on this.
Recognition of
I
the
want to
plight of the
unstuck us.
Palestinian people.
I want to unstick us.
Recognition of
I want to
the plight-
unstick us, and I want to go to Staxiums because Staxiums hopefully
Okay,
will
for it.
unstick us a little bit.
Yeah, no, I have a question because I've heard this. Here's how. I mean, look, let's say like a rapist / mass murderer starts going through the streets and picks up a baby to hide himself from gunpoint or something. Obviously, we can agree that is probably one of the most evil fucking human beings on the planet Earth. My question is does that justify someone shooting at that person anyway? And like, I think
the
that
answer,
yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I would say,
Yes.
I want to answer this first because I have strong opinions
Okay.
about this. If they are actively killing other people, right, they have that shield, yes. Yes.
Yeah. So the answer is
Sickening, it's
that,
gross, but it's not your fault that you've been put in that position, right? It's not the IDF's fault that they've been put in
So-
this position. It is explicitly Hamas's
For-
fault, right? And the blame,
I agree. It's explicitly
primarily,
about-
not always, right? Because I do believe the IDF doesn't take enough care, but in general, right? It's Hamas's fault because Hamas has put them in a situation where they can either risk
I agree.
killing,
Hamas's fault.
risk
So the
killing the
parallel
baby
possible
shield,
situation.
or risk Hamas murdering that other baby, right? That's over there that they're currently stabbing, right?
So the parallel that I would give is
Mhm.
prior to 9/11, it was generally the belief that if terrorists take over a plane, that you should let them do it, and you should just let them and put your hands up, and whatever they're telling you to do, just do
Sure.
it, and hopefully that will allow you to get to be able to get there to safety. And the reason for that is because there was a presumption that the worst case scenario when there's a hostile takeover of a plane is that everyone on the plane ends up dead.
Mhm.
Then on 9/11, we realized that that is not the worst case scenario. And I think similarly, in the case of Hamas in Gaza, the worst case scenario of people that they are hiding behind being killed, we have come to the realization that that is not the worst case scenario, that there is something that is far worse than that. And that we saw that on October 7th, but we've also seen it again. The vast majority of the problem that Hamas represents is not to Israelis, is not to the people in Israel proper. It is to the Gazan people. It is to the people who they have had a dictatorial control over for 17 years, over whom they have stolen $11 billion from people who don't have access to fresh drinking water because they are pulling up the pipes in order to make rockets, in order to
Yeah.
shoot those rockets while hiding behind kids. So,
Yeah.
like, yeah, at this point, yeah, when there's a Hamas terrorist, we got to kill the Hamas terrorist. And the truth is that, like, right now, Israel isn't even doing that. Right? Israel right now is still doing regularly knocks before they end up shooting down known places that are harboring. I shouldn't even say harboring, because again, it's not like these people have a choice of whether or not the Hamas terrorists are going to be there. But Hamas people are there, and we know that there are Hamas people there, and yet we're still doing knocks. Israel is still making the decision to give warning so that those innocent civilians can escape. But the truth is that the implication of that is that the Hamas terrorists are also going to escape. And that means they're going to do it again and again and again and again for the next decade. And so this is the point where I get to the point where, like, yeah, at this point, there needs to be an invasion. At this point, there needs to be an occupation, because the truth is that Hamas needs to get out of power. They need to no longer have control over the innocent Gazan people, because the result of that is not just this one individual moment where they have, are hiding behind these civilians, but rather that they have 2.2 million hostages that they are using as a weapon of war and will continue to do so up until the point that we stop them from being able to.
Can I add something to that? I think people don't understand that in a situation where there's an occupation in Gaza, which I support, by the way. I'm talking about an occupation in a positive sense, like we were talking
Mhm.
about. People don't understand that if the IDF, for example, does that, the IDF, in my opinion at least, it should be the case that they would protect the civilians there the same way they protect the Israeli citizens from Hamas. They would not just like Israel would not the IDF would not operate in the same way Hamas does
Well,
if there is an occupation
What
in
do you
Gaza
say
in order
though,
to reform
Mono?
it.
But what do you say though to and I've had this argument, right? And they've presented evidence that there has been atrocities committed by the IDF on Palestinian civilians, right? Not Hamas,
Yeah,
but
there has been.
Palestinians, right? So when you say things like when we occupy Gaza, we will treat the Palestinians fairly, you can understand why someone might be a little skeptical of that, correct?
Well, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, it's correct, but we'll definitely treat them better than Hamas, and I think that there should be a lot of pressure on the IDF to treat them better than they had until now.
Sure.
If we're gonna occupy Gaza, because it's
So I made a
it's for our benefit too, and we can't and we have to treat them right.
So I made a
I mean,
video.
I
just
think it's
about
important. We have to
specifically this
talk.
subject of what occupation would look like. After, so I had a debate with 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 about this subject about whether or not there should be an occupation. But then after I went into a lot more detail in it. And yeah, I think that the solution has to be one. There has to be a recognition that obviously, though horrible, the situation in Area C is infinitely better as an average, member of the public, Arab member of the public, Palestinian member of the public, than it is to be in Gaza under Hamas. That's the number one starting point. But the number two starting point is that doesn't mean that Area C is good. And so there has to be a fundamental belief that as soon as you get to that Area C type style occupation of Gaza, immediately, both in Area C of the West Bank as well as in the totality of Gaza, there needs to be elections, and those elections need to not allow Hamas to be a part of it. But the reality is that the people are probably going to elect people who are very radical, and that needs to be a civil control, but it can't be military control.
But
so you get to a
that
point where you
points
have
to something that
Area B.
Rafi said. And I want to get Rafi's opinion on this too, right? Is that right now in Gaza, and in Gaza specifically, if they had elections tomorrow, it'd probably be towards some Hamas-like thing, right? So how do you square that circle, right? We recognize that they have been so radicalized by their education system and things like that right now. Can we, how feasible are elections at this point, right? You would wouldn't it just perpetuate the problem?
Yes. Unironically, no elections. Unironically, I'm going to meme a little bit. I don't mean this in the literal sense, but re-education camps, right? I mean, kids needs to learn that Jews are not demons, that we're not out to kill them, and that they don't need to sacrifice their lives to kill us. And I mean, there's no squaring that circle, right? This also applies to Israelis. I think actually one of the biggest things that is necessary is mandatory cross-language education. Israeli children must be required to learn Arabic, and Palestinian children must be required to learn Hebrew. Right now, Israelis cannot even communicate with Palestinians. There's no way to even have a dialogue because we don't speak the same language. So, this is just a practicality, but we must have education. But education across all boundaries, across all paradigms, that is the starting point. There has to be intergenerational change within the society.
So the linguistic component of that, I think I fully agree with if you're talking about in terms of Israel proper. But if you're talking about in terms of the West Bank or in terms
I'm talking about all of the areas. Yes, Palestinians must, even outside of Israel, must be required to learn Hebrew. There's no way we'll have peace if they aren't.
When you're talking about West Bank and Gaza, there needs to be an understanding that we're trying to get to a trajectory where those are an independent country. And getting to that trajectory where they're an independent country, I think requires that there be an understanding that in civil matters, they need to be in control. And that doesn't mean that they're going to come to the same conclusions that I would. It doesn't mean they're going to come to conclusions that I wish that they were going to. But if we're talking about military control, absolutely, military control at this point needs to be in the hands, particularly in Gaza, of the IDF, which is unfortunate, but it's a reality. But in terms of civil control, we need to get to a trajectory where it is both one, democratic, but also two, democratically elected Palestinians in control of what will eventually be an independent Palestinian state.
Okay,
I'm sorry,
so
I think that's simply not possible in a world where today 70% of Palestinians support armed fighting against us. There is no world in which any Israeli. There's no world in which any Israeli is comfortable with a sovereign Palestinian state that has control over their own military and civil affairs.
I agree with you.
That's what I'm saying. So there can be no movements towards self-civil governance.
We need to get
I know
to that
the trajectory starts.
And
the trajectory starts with education. And it doesn't start with their own civil governance. It cannot start with their own elections where they just vote in Islamic Jihad or some other secondary party that's just going to do the exact same thing.
Getting to that trajectory, I think, requires that first we allow the Palestinian people themselves, and particularly the Gazan people themselves, to realize, holy shit, this is not the only possibility, right? And that's why the military control is absolutely crucially in the hands of the IDF. But in terms of the civil control, yes, the truth is that for the first decade, it's going to be horrible and they're not going to make particularly that much progress. You're right. But if you're going to get to that second decade, and you're going to get to that second decade where they all of a sudden new people are able to come, again, genuinely elected, new people are able to come to power 10, 15 years down the line, and those people are able to be real progressives progressives who genuinely do want to see peace happen. And also dually genuine Palestinians who genuinely are Muslims and genuinely do care about those facets as well. For that to happen, there has to be democracy first, and that democracy can't be tainted by a sense in which it is undergirdingly controlled civilly by Israel.
Okay. Gang, I want to respect everyone's time here. We've gone for about 2 hours now. I want to give everyone a chance to have closing statements, tell people who you are, what you do. For those of you who'd like to stay a little longer, I will be opening up this call. So if you want to ask a Jewish person about this situation, gang, and you are in here, and you're in one of my chats, whether it be YouTube or Twitch or Kick, feel free to jump in my Discord and jump backstage, and I can pull you on.
Hashtag Ask a Jew.
I wasn't going to make that joke. But anyway, first and foremost, where can people find you? Just be brief, concise. Closing thoughts, where people can find you, etc. If you need to go, I understand. If you'd like to stay, it'd be appreciated. We'll start with Go. Go ahead.
I'll skip me. I'll be last.
Jason, go ahead.
Hopefully you can't find me anywhere because there have been too many threats all over the place towards Jews, so I'm going to keep it at that.
Well, thanks for coming and thanks for risking it all to come on a WhickTV panel.
I appreciate it.
Mono, go ahead.
You can find me at Monokuro the Demon on Twitch and at Mono the Demon on Twitter. And Monokuro on YouTube.
Check them out, gang. Staxiums.
Staxiums everywhere. TikTok, YouTube. That's about it. Thanks.
Cool. Silverhand.
Yeah, you can't really find me anywhere. I don't have a channel. All I kind of do is just fuck around on Twitter. Doesn't really matter.
Quibbles.
At @QuibblesC on Twitter, also at @QuibblesC on YouTube. On YouTube, I have made a video already about West Bank settlements. Also, one already on the Gaza Strip and sort of how that trajectory can be made. And I'm also currently working on one which is going to be about left-wing anti-Semitism and specifically about Sockdon Left.
Interesting. Sockdon Left, friend of the channel. We'll see how that goes. But thank you for coming, and we'll talk to you when we can.
Oh wait, yeah. So you can't find me anywhere. So, but it doesn't matter.
Okay, fair enough. Rafi, go ahead.
Like others have said, I can't be found anywhere. But looking forward to a day where we have peace.
I too look forward to the day. Gang, you're asking, will I have a Palestinian voice this thing? Yes, if Palestinians want to come, not Arabs, right, but Palestinians specifically want to come on my show to talk about their issues. Yes, absolutely, I would have that. I would love that to be the case, right? So if you have any that are willing to talk or wanting to speak up, come on, I'll give them the platform to do so. I'd love to have them. And we could have a sit down like this where they can just give their perspectives and just as friendly as this was. And with that, gang, what we got coming up for the week tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be talking to 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙, who says a one-state solution is the only solution, and I think that's bullshit. And so I have agreed to debate him on the topic, and so that should be fun.
I'm not going to tolerate him, I think.
I'm not going to be doing anything Wednesday or Thursday because Thanksgiving in America. And then Friday, we're going to have something entirely different, a little break from all this. And we're going to be talking about men's issues. We're going to have the man panel. We're going to have Lycan. We're going to have Lactoid and a few others. That should be fun. Okay. Well, great. And in that case, if you need to go, I understand. And if you want to call in, now is the time. ! Discord in chat. Click the link, accept the rules, jump backstage. We'll pull you in. Hashtag Ask a Jew. Apparently. So,
oh no!
I'm gonna stick around, but I'm gonna turn my camera off because I'm gonna be walking around.
Do you think?
Yeah, I'll stay here.
Yeah, come on, gang. You guys have been wilding in chat. I've seen a lot of comments, right? Rustic Fool, right?
Stupid comments too.
Right? Yeah, Rustic Fool. You had a lot to say. You want to come on and talk to us a little bit? I'll let you have your questions. Link invalid. Why is the link invalid? Let me give you guys the current link if it's having a problem. Give me a second.
You know what? While we're waiting, I just want to say it's cool of everyone to show up. It's honestly been pretty illuminating for me, all the different perspectives. Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like we could agree on so much, but it's just like there's the tiniest little bits of difference that I'm like, ooh, that's interesting.
No, I've been learning a ton.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, while we wait, if you guys want to like talk amongst yourselves, please.
Yeah, I think
don't
that
stop.
part of the problem, just if we're gonna like sort of zoom out to the broader situation of how Twitch works, like it is unfortunate that when we have like more nuanced conversations like this, it's they're like there's a sense in which like we're trying to like there's a degree to which like people want to have arguments with like the crazies, and then when you end up having a conversation with like more nuanced, real people who are actually sort of grappling with the issues more seriously, those don't end up having like the clippable moments in the same way, because we end up having a lot more agreement. We end up having people like actually grappling seriously. So like with the exception of a couple of points where like Rafi, I thought you were a little bit silly, but like
Okay, I feel likewise.
broadly. But broadly, yeah, most for the most part, there was a lot of agreement, and even with Rafi, I think that I would include you in that. Yeah.
I also just want to like, this wasn't meant to be like a serious debate, right? Like I do, where I have two sides and they go at each other.
Right.
One of the things that I wanted to give you all a chance to do is to come on and to just share your thoughts and experiences without having to have some stupid like asshole just constantly badgering you, right? About like, well, how dare you feel threatened, or tell you to
Well,
calm
chat.
down, or things like that, right? Well, chat's chat.
so
Chat doesn't
it
matter.
wasn't
Chat is lesser. Chat is we are an apartheid state towards chat here. Chat
Yeah,
does
where's
not have the
Vivian?
same rights as
Vivian
panelists. Okay?
Vivian Wolf. I'm gonna call her out now. Vivian Wolf was in chat,
Mm.
okay, and she has run
Vivian,
away.
I want to hear you out.
She's not
You
here
bailed on my
now.
last panel. I want
And
to hear you.
I'm in the words of Stephen Destiny Bonnell, super curious where she went. Okay, I'm super curious. All right. Yeah.
Dude, she bailed on one panel that I was in. I don't know. She might have a reason, but I really wanted to hear her opinion on
Yeah,
this
no, but
subject, so-
unironically, I would be curious to hear her thoughts on this.
Okay, I could DM her and see
Me too.
what's going on. Also,
Yeah,
if you guys
DM
want
her.
to talk a little bit about the, because this was brought up as well before, the UN being a biased organization. Does anyone disagree with that here?
No.
I can't imagine a
That's
single Jew
absolutely
that's not
true.
like totally lost in the sauce to leftist thought disagreeing with that statement.
The fact that
Those
there are
tech-
two refugee organizations of the UN, and one is exclusively on the issue of Israel-Palestine and has a completely definition of refugee. That
And
is
sorry, and without a
probably worth
mandate
pointing
to
out.
resettle refugees, right? Without a mandate
Yeah,
to
without a
actually
mandate
do
to
anything
actually-
about
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
refugee problem.
Their only job is just shit on Israel. They literally have no other
Yep.
mandate as an organization. It is exclusively just like, Israel, fuck you. That's the entire point.
To
But
chat
every single
with
Okay,
Wick,
just
I'll
chat.
get,
like-
Hey, just real quick. Satellite of Love, if you're trying to get in, don't jump in the pit. Jump backstage. You jump backstage, and I will drag you in. Cool? Cool.
to
Fair
both chat and to Wick, I would strongly recommend people look into the number of resolutions that the UN General Council has passed on various states.
I have that. So from 2015
Israel
to
is more than
2022
double,
has
I
adopted,
believe.
UN General Assembly has adopted 140 resolutions on Israel and 68 on other countries. So
Yeah, 68 on the rest of the world, right? So we're more than
Everywhere.
double the rest of the world in a conflict that has lost less people in 80 years than I think died in like a month in the Syrian conflict. So
They
I mean,
couldn't
it's,
even condemn the attacks. They couldn't even do it. They couldn't
Yeah.
condemn October 7th, and yet they're calling, and they can all agree on a ceasefire.
and
How
I think
are we
it's,
gonna make
hasn't this whole
peace?
conflict kind of shown
How are we
like,
gonna make peace when the most when even the most charitable people on our side are getting attacked and being called a genocidal freak?
Yeah, that's
Okay, even the most leftist view, most pro-Palestinian view, if you're a Jew, yeah, you're gonna be called
If you were a Jew and you don't
I was
want
called an
to
Israeli
die,
No, like,
genocidal Zionist.
legitimately, if you-
unless
how
you
can
are
we make-
calling, so
How
this
can we
I've gotten
make
this
peace
too.
when this is the,
Yeah,
the
I've
situation?
gotten. Look, I've gotten this too. Right there, we had F-bombs in chat earlier. Who's basically just he's called me the Lord of the Jews. Apparently, I don't know why.
I mean, Wick, do you want to become an honorary Jew? We have space in the tribe.
Look, if
He
you
is
guys want to bestow
outnumbered.
that honor on
I'll
me,
talk to the Mossad. I'm sure we can
we
Okay,
set
can just
something up with you.
democratically vote him out.
but I will say that like there is this if you are not in the streets chanting death to Israel, you are seen as a Zionist sympathizer. And a
I do,
genocider.
yeah, because I would say that I'm probably one of the most pro-Palestine voices here, and like when I go on TikTok, which is just like so pro-Palestine, like yeah, it's a little insane. Like I was like, I don't think Osama bin Laden is that good actually, and then like I just get shit on. It was fucking
Oh, that's so
insane.
Actually,
Yeah,
deranged.
the Bin
No, did you
Laden
guys hear
letter.
about all
Holy
that? It was
shit.
no,
How
like
about
people
the,
were like, "Oh,
there's-
he was pro-Palestine." I was like, "He's
Yeah, it
pro-Palestine. He
wasn't
hates
that
Jews, homie."
bad.
Like there's a
I
little bit
feel
of
like there's
a
also this new trend coming up now of like, at least I've seen it on Twitter, leftists radicalized into becoming a Muslim, and I've seen this like at least like four different instances of this.
Oh, I haven't reached that level
Wait,
yet.
say that again. Say that again.
If you don't
No
It's
way.
convert
a lot
to
of-
Islam, you're
I've noticed a lot of-
Islamophobic. That's very clear.
Wait,
a lot
yeah,
of
wait, I'm outta here.
leftists after the the Osama bin
We
Laden
have a
letter
caller,
for
by the way.
one. I've seen a lot of them suddenly become radicalized into just wholeheartedly becoming Muslim.
Okay, Satellite,
Vivian
mute the
is
stream
live.
just real
Vivian's
quick.
in
Satellite,
backstage.
hold on,
No way.
or else we're not gonna get here. Satellite, you need to mute the stream so we don't get that echo, right?
Got it. Oop.
Okay. Satellite, you're here?
I'm looking at the backstage and I'm
Ask the
very happy.
question, and Vivian's next, but go ahead. Satellite, you're up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, what do you got?
Oh, okay. Hi, how's it going? Yeah, so the whole thing so there's like talk about the ceasefire and everything, and I know this is like it's a a kinetic military operation, and it's like you have to keep the momentum going and everything like that, but it's also there's kind of there's a low return on sort of investment if you're bombing urban areas and everything. It's kind of the only thing that really kind of does really would really root out an organization like Hamas is essentially it has to come down to house, street by street. It's going to be won by boots on the ground. And it's kind of like I see it like this kind of going. It's like America, like Israel could learn from America's mistakes when 9/11 happened and everything. Is that we didn't really take out Al Qaeda by invading Iraq or Afghanistan, but actually going after and just dismantling the organization, surgically. So, with that being said, I mean, what would be the possibility of say like a limited like a cease of the bombing?
It already is.
Ceasefire.
Already
I'd like
is.
to answer this from a military perspective, right? There's zero chance of stopping the bombing. Okay, we are currently doing house-to-house ground fighting. Many of my friends are currently there right now.
Yeah.
So there's zero chance of us stopping the bombing, and you should be thankful. We should all be thankful that there's zero chance of us stopping the airstrikes, because a ground invasion without targeted airstrikes is unbelievably
Suicide.
lethal to civilians. Right now, we can precisely target people with high precision munitions from our jets. Okay, this is an unbelievable utility when it comes to preserving life, because it gives us the opportunity to react both preemptively and also with high precision. Without air support, the things that are going to be firing at these buildings is going to be artillery and it's going to be tanks. This is massive loss of civilian life when we talk about
Yep.
ground invasions without air support. So you should be thankful, you should pray that the IAF is above Gaza every day while the ground forces are operating there and going street to street, because otherwise we're going to see huge increases in the number of civilian deaths.
Okay,
I
well,
agree.
and
I absolutely agree.
Just we do
Okay,
got a line
well-
right now, so Satellite, just one last question, then we're gonna let you go.
Okay. So yeah, if there's going to be a two-state solution, I know that some people were talking about that as well and stuff. Like, what is the Israeli settler like? How's that going to be handled? I mean, essentially, that's the thing. It's like, okay, if you
The
couldn't just
settlements
like
have to
pull
go.
out in a vacuum. And
Yep.
the settlements, like if they're a major sticking point for the other side and everything with Palestinians and everything. And that's kind of the consensus is that under international law or what was passed by the UN, whether how people think about that. I mean, if the settlements have to go, the thing is it's like you got like, let me see, for whatever reason they're there. There's children there too that didn't have that choice, and it's like it's like it would have to be, I guess. That I guess there would have to be, consideration to the fact that they have to be protected. I mean, they just can't be left.
There
I
can be
think-
reparations. There should
My
be
answer
many things,
here-
but they have to go.
My answer here is that they don't have to go. They have to stop being Israeli. So first, number one component is that 90% of the population, the Israeli Jewish population living in the West Bank, is within a mile, literally 1 mile of the border with Israel proper. And so those ones, I think, should, generally speaking, for the most part, be folded into Israel proper. particularly around Jerusalem. Jerusalem is surrounded by on 3 of 4 sides by the West Bank, and if it's going to survive as a population drastically increases, one of 2 things is going to have to happen. Either one, it's going to have to be able to sprawl around where it is currently, around Jerusalem proper, or specifically on the western side of Jerusalem, which is to say the Israeli side of it, or it's going to have to be able to build up in Western Jerusalem. And the building up option of that is really horrible. And the reason for that is because there's just simply so much history of that land. There's simply so much both religious, sure, but also beyond religious, just in terms of like cultural heritage, in terms of the importance as just like history of the world, let alone history of Jews or of Muslims or of Christians. I'm really uncomfortable tearing up that history. And I think that when we talk about ethnic cleansing, we very often sort of fall into the idea of ethnic cleansing strictly as a matter of cleansing of people, but it's not exclusively a matter of cleansing of people. It's also a matter of cleansing of place. And the cleansing of place that's being described there, I think, is really horrible. So I think that there has to be those that people who are very close to the border. Now, the ones that are inland, those ones I think should be a Jewish minority within Palestine. In the same way that I don't think that Israel is a ethno state and shouldn't be an ethno state, I also don't think that Palestine should be an ethno state, and it should be able to have a minority but not a majority Jewish population.
Okay, well, thank you for calling in, Mr. Satellite of Love. I hope that answered your question, and thanks for coming to #AskAJew. Okay, just before we bring Vivian on,
I'm so proud of myself.
Just before we bring Vivian on, okay, we're gonna let her get her answers out first, and then you can respond. I know Vivian. Let her get her answer out first, and then respond. Okay, I'm just warning this now. I'm warning you this.
I'm already warming up the space laser.
Okay.
Also, can we have some kind of like ordered answering so everybody can?
I will try to make that work. That's my job as a moderator. I'll do my best to make sure everyone gets a chance to answer. Okay. I know Quibbles.
Can you do your job then?
Oh.
Kidding.
No, you're not, and it's okay. It's okay. Fine. I understand.
I
understand. I love you too. And just because I was told that I wouldn't be brave enough to tell you this dance for whatever reason, so again, right? My stance on free speech is that everyone gets a voice. Yes, even Nazis, even people who want to hurt Jews, right? So I think that protests, peaceful protests, right? To be clear, ones that do not involve violence, should be allowed, even in front of synagogues, even by Nazis. That is my stance.
Yeah.
That's free speech.
Yeah,
I'm not scared to tell you that. Right? And
I agree that they should be allowed, but I want to parse there, because there is a difference between protests and specifically protests in front of shuls. In that, like, I think that one thing is it's possible to be anti-Zionist and not be anti-Semitic, but when you start doing it in front of shuls, that is anti-Semitic. So it should still be legally permitted.
Yep.
But I do put it in.
I would say if you should protest as a Nazi, right? Like, obviously, but
I
don't think you should be arrested for it.
We're just talking about from a legal perspective. Morally, if your friend's doing it.
Sorry, clip it. Wick supports Nazis, guys.
Yeah.
Holy
anyway,
shit.
Let's bring on Vivian. You're live. Welcome to #AskAJew.
Whoop whoop.
Go ahead, Vivian. Well, I suppose Quibbles, you're the one that challenged her. So I guess Quibbles.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you want me to fucking say.
Exactly.
I was not here. I have no idea what was said. So feel free to repeat whatever the call out was.
Yeah.
And don't make it fucking nice because I'm here in front of your face now. Okay? Put in every fucking insult. I want to hear that dumb fucking bitch who said that fucking nonsense, right? I want to hear it all.
Exactly what you said.
I don't think anyone said anything particularly rude.
Yeah. Wait, what did I? What, I don't even remember.
I feel like
you called to me. Hold on, stop this, because this is annoying. Quibbles, you said get Vivian on. I wanna yell at Vivian, right? I don't forget your exact words.
I think he assumed that you watched the entire thing, maybe.
So fucking yell at me. Let's go.
She was saying stuff in it. Yeah. So I'm curious what your view is in terms of what you think the future should be in Gaza.
Well, I think the future should be in Gaza.
Yeah. What should Israel do?
I mean, beyond not bombing the shit out of innocent civilians. I mean, there's not
Yeah, beyond that.
What do you what do you want from me? I can't solve the Middle East crisis on this panel right now. My only prescriptions are like stop propping up insane far right demagogues in both the Likud party and other far right parties in the Israeli government and Hamas right in Gaza, right? Stop giving these people support.
I'm just writing this down.
Start promoting more secular groups, more secular groups, less genocidal groups.
We've been on that
right?
before the 7th.
Yeah, are you under
So
the
you're
impression
against
Israel's-
ultra right-wing, non-secular, theocratic governments, correct?
Sorry, what was that?
I'm just writing this down. You're against like ultra right-wing, nationalistic, non-secular forms of government, correct?
Sure, yeah, theocracy.
Okay,
is
are you
bad.
against Hamas?
I mean, obviously.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so how do you want to get rid of
Sorry,
Hamas?
what do you mean just fucking checking? Like, anybody who's heard me talk on this issue, fucking at
I don't
all.
know you that
swear-
well.
know you, and there are a lot of unhinged people.
You know how we
I
said
don't
one
think
table at
there's
a
a lot of-
time? This is what we're
Yes,
gonna do.
100%. I did a little tour early on, fucking talking about Zarqawi and ISIS and Al Qaeda and how the particular forms of propaganda are used by Islamic jihadist groups.
Sorry,
right?
I should have gotten a biography for you.
You want to get
next
rid of
time. My
Hamas
bad.
and you also want to get rid of Likud. The way that you get rid of Likud is very obvious. People vote differently, right? And the parliament, as was true not long ago, it was not under the hands of Bibi Netanyahu, and hopefully we can
You
manage to
unify
get to
the
that
left.
point in the
That's
relatively
how
near
you get
future.
rid of Likud.
Yeah, so that's the way that you get it inside of Israel proper. In terms of in Gaza, how do you expect the dictatorship that hasn't had an elections for 17 years to be forced out of power?
How do I expect them to be forced out of power? Well, currently, they're probably going to be bombed to shit, and Gaza will probably end up under an even stricter occupation than it was before.
Right, but you
okay,
don't
just
you don't
like
want
the,
the bombing to happen, right?
I
So if
doubt
you're
that
saying
the
Hold on, one at a time.
elections
Whoa,
will be the
one at a
same.
time, one at a time, one at a time, one at a time.
Okay,
You guys want me to
so-
do my job? Let me do my job. First
Okay.
of all, are you done talking, Viv? If you are, we're gonna go to Rafi next.
Why,
Right.
Rafi? I was in the middle of a line of questions.
Oh my god!
if you want to
I'm just,
remove you want
Okay.
Hamas removed, but you don't want us
You
to
want-
bomb the Gaza Strip, what would you like us to do to remove Hamas? Like, what would be your proposed plan of action for our military, our governments, whoever? What should we do? I mean, let's take a step back, right? You don't
Sure.
like Hamas, so we can't coexist with Hamas, right? You agree with that?
Probably not.
Okay.
They've always been incredibly extremist, incredibly anti-Semitic. They are definitely more extreme and radical than they were, but that's not really saying much, right? Like
Right.
they were already pretty extremist.
Right. So we can't coexist.
back in-
We need to
back in
remove them, but
2000
we can't. We don't want us to bomb them.
whatever.
So what would be your proposed course of action?
She just said though, but that she's not gonna solve the crisis.
No,
She
I
can
understand, but
have
you're
a
telling us to not
suggestion.
defend ourselves, right? We're saying the bombing that we're currently doing.
Oh, fuck off
Wait,
with
wait,
your
wait, wait,
Israel
let
has a
her
right to
answer.
defend
Let her
itself
answer
fucking
before you-
horseshit. Israel has a right to defend itself does not fucking include the indiscriminate bombing of civilians. It does not
That's a
include
lie.
the use
That's
of...
a
no,
lie.
it's
It
very
does not.
indiscriminate.
It does
It's
not
not-
include the
it's
use
not
of white
indiscriminate.
phosphorus in the
It's
Gaza
not
Strip
true.
Oh, we just went over that too.
in
Oh.
dense built-up
That's
areas.
fake
It
news.
does not. It
It's
is
not
not fake news. So
It's not
Yes,
I,
it is.
It's
Even
not.
Vivian, that's fine. I agree with everything you said. Our right
Cool.
to defend ourselves does not include any of those things.
No, I
100% agree.
I get super pissed because it's a thought-terminating cliche. And when you ask a politician, whatever, are you against these war crimes that Israel is committing in Gaza? They're like, Israel has a right to defend itself. As if that's a fucking answer to the question.
I
Okay?
agree with you
I
that
d-
our right to defend ourselves does not include
Didn't
any of those
you
things.
just
So I'm
use
asking you, how should we defend ourselves?
Thought-terminating cliches.
When you say our right, are you Israeli?
Yes.
He's Israeli. I'm not. Yeah.
He's Israeli. I'm
Who am I?
Israeli.
Who am I talking to? Who's
So
Israeli?
Rafi is
Rafi.
Israeli, Mono's
Rafi's
Israeli, Goat is Israeli.
Cool. All right. Are you guys all living in Israel or
I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
like Israeli expats or immigrants or whatever you want to call
No,
yourself?
I'm,
We're all
born
here,
and
I
raised.
believe.
Yeah. You're all there. Okie dokes.
So again, I'd like to just ask, how ought we defend ourselves? Because I'm not asking you to solve the conflict. I'm not asking you any big picture questions. You're telling me that what we're currently doing does not qualify as defending ourselves. So I'm asking
Yeah,
you,
clearly.
okay, how do we defend ourselves?
I mean, there are numerous different ways, right? I mean, Israel has Israel has such a huge fucking technological advantage over.
Yeah, that's our Air Force. That's what we're currently using.
Yeah,
our technological advantage. So how ought we? if you don't want us to use it, right? You're telling me that the technological advantage we have, you don't want us to use. So what ought we do?
You can use the Air Force. You can even fucking bomb places, okay? My problem is not with bombing, it's with indiscriminate bombing. It's with the murder of over 11,000 fucking civilians. It's with the fact that like
Vivian,
half of those are fucking children.
I have a question.
It's with rolling into fucking.
If you believe,
so just keep doing what we're doing. Okay, cool. That's
no. The question is, where do we bomb? Because, or where does Israel bomb? Because
if you
like,
there aren't like.
I don't know. I don't have access.
Apparently, we're just bombing
their headquarters.
of Gaza
their headquarters.
Wait.
I'm sorry. Is it now nearly a week after Al-Shifa was bombed, and I've seen no evidence to suggest that their headquarters were in Al-Shifa? I'm sorry.
What?
Okay.
We literally released videos proving that.
Since when?
We released their own security footage. What are you? What?
This isn't even worth.
I
have a very simple question, Vivian. I have a very simple question.
That there may have been Hamas activity in Al-Shifa hospital. Sure, that this is the headquarters of Hamas? Fucking no.
You understand? Wait, I'm sorry. You understand we haven't even been able to go into the tunnels yet because we will all die.
What do you mean operating out of there? So far we've seen footage of them taking two people who were identified by the Israeli authorities as hostages to the hospital. One of whom looked seriously injured. The other of whom it was very difficult to tell. I would say, frankly, that if they're gonna take hostages,
and a third
is
body
a crime,
there, right?
which is a crime,
and a third body found there, right? I'm sorry.
A third body. What do you mean a third body?
There was a third hostage.
I mean, there were a lot of bodies in Al-Shifa.
No. An Israeli
after the
hostage,
IDF rolled in.
But an Israeli. Well, okay. I'd like to see your sourcing on the number of bodies found in Al-Shifa. That would be very interesting, given that it has.
I mean, they're continuing to find bodies as more people keep dying. But yeah,
you understand that there was a third hostage there as well, right? I just want to be clear, since you missed that one.
Sure. I'm not aware of a third hostage.
I have a very simple question for you, Vivian.
Sorry, one that was executed there.
Yes.
Yeah, they claim.
What does that mean?
There is evidence that the third body, I think her name was Noah, was executed in the hospital.
Okay. I don't know anything about this one. I will not take the Israeli authorities at their word because they consistently lie about fucking everything.
Okay.
But
Jesus Christ.
They don't.
Jesus Christ what? Jesus Christ
I
what?
just get so
On
tired
a
of that.
Jewish panel of all things. On a Jewish panel of all things. Jesus Christ, really?
This
Do
statement
you know how many
can
times I
go
say
both ways.
Jesus Christ throughout
This
the day?
statement can
It's a
go
joke.
both ways.
I know.
Don't talk about.
Yes. Hamas lies. Hamas lies all the fucking
Can
time.
go both
Hamas
ways. You
lies
can't use the
significantly
statement.
more.
No. Yeah, these are not. Sorry, these are not equivalent things. We can't say Hamas lies all the time.
They're pretty equivalent. They're pretty equivalent.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No,
The number of
sorry,
times
Vivian,
Israel has
no.
engaged in any kind of lies.
Okay,
IDF
why
and Hamas
do you
are
think?
not equivalent.
In terms of no. You know what? You're
Okay,
absolutely
enough.
right.
Stop.
The
I'm gonna. This
Yeah,
is
yeah,
chaos.
yeah.
This cannot continue. This is chaos. This
Also
cannot
wrong.
continue. We gotta go one at a time. We gotta go one at a time.
I can't. Yeah.
One
It's
at a
like
time.
all these
So
people against
Vivian
me, right?
finished, and I want
So-
Quibbles to go. Then I want Goat to go, and then I want
So to
Rafi
clarify-
to go.
So to clarify, the IDF and Hamas are not equivalent, obviously, right? Because Hamas are an entire fucking organization that is involved in a whole bunch of different things, right? Whereas the IDF are strictly the military force of the state of Israel, right? I would even go so far as to say, Hamas and Israel are not fucking equivalent either, right? But Hamas and people like Itamar Ben-Gvir, yeah, they're the same fucking people. They're the same fucking
Pretty
people
much,
with
yeah.
the same
I would agree.
genocidal ideals, who are
but that's
perfectly
not
happy.
Don't interrupt. Sorry. This is wild.
You did not say
people-
that
finish.
statement.
And
Stop interrupting her. Don't interrupt her.
And people like Itamar Ben-Gvir are the people who are currently shaping policy, shaping government response to the assault on October the 7th. Okay.
Okay.
you think
And
Itamar
with that,
Ben-Gvir
one at a
is the
time.
one
No,
who-
stop.
Okay.
One at a time. Quibbles
The
first,
IDF.
then Goat,
Vivian.
then Rafi.
Okay, Vivian, you
Then
said
Mono.
that Israel is guilty of indiscriminately bombing Gaza. Do
Yes.
you admit that if they wanted to, they have the weapons capacity, they have the military capacity to carpet bomb all of Gaza and take out the entire. Okay.
Yes,
why aren't they
do that,
doing that if their goal is to indiscriminately bomb the people
because
of
of
Gaza?
because of what they
rather than go
because of
after
the
Hamas?
because of what they've spoken about numerous fucking times throughout this conflict, world opinion as regarding Israel, right? Israel's place in the Middle East.
Mental gymnastics, let's go.
Sorry?
This
How
is
is this mental
wild.
gymnastics? So Israel's place in the Middle East depends on significant support from multiple Western nations.
It doesn't.
Its place
You're wrong.
in
It's not
No,
true.
it doesn't.
hey, if we
You're
if
just
if
parroting. You're just
You're strictly
parroting Twitter.
incorrect.
parroting what?
You're just
the
parroting.
You
Parroting
you don't
what?
know
What am I
situation-
parroting?
If we were talking about Ukraine, Ukraine wouldn't exist without America. That is not true of
Yeah,
Israel.
no, that's very
Israel
true.
would absolutely exist.
You have
tomorrow.
No, true. Israel
You have
wouldn't
absolutely
exist.
no idea what it
Oh,
means.
sorry, one at a time.
Is-
One at
is-
a time.
is-
One at a
What
time.
support?
One at a
It
time.
is simply It is simply not one-to-one. You are incorrect. It's not a matter of opinion. You are factually, you do not understand the conflict. If you think that
Yes.
Israel is reliant on the United States in the same way that Ukraine is reliant on the United States, do they have a relationship with the United States?
Israel.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
that is
that's-
not
I
the
said
same
Israel's.
thing. They
I
could
said
get away with it.
ignorance.
If they wanted to get away with it,
Holy
they
fucking
could.
shit. Okay, I said Israel's position in the Middle East depends very significantly on support from numerous Western countries. What I didn't say
That's
was
shifting the
Israel's
goalposts.
shut up. No, it's not fucking shifting the goalposts. I am restating
Absolutely.
verbatim the thing that I said before.
You
How is
said
that
if
shifting?
they're
How can
trying-
shifting? How can
Because
I be
Vivian, I'm trying to
shifting the
explain.
goalposts
Yeah, I'm trying to
if I
explain.
repeat the
Because you
exact
said-
words I said 5 seconds
Because
before?
you said
How can I do
indiscriminate.
that?
You said that Israel wants to do indiscriminate bombing. And now you're admitting that if they actually wanted to do that, they would be able to do it. And now you're saying that despite the fact that they are able to do it and clearly don't want to do it or else they would be doing it, you're saying that somehow you aren't like, this is crazy.
That is not what I
Either
said
they're
at
capable
all.
of doing it, which they are.
Let me
and are choosing
rephrase.
not to do
Let
it,
me
Yeah,
rephrase,
or
Vivian.
they are
Stop!
not
Stop! Stop!
capable of
Stop!
doing
Stop!
it.
Stop!
He's
Stop!
doing it.
Stop! Stop!
So what I
Stop!
said
Quibble,
is-
stop!
what you
You too,
said
Vivian.
is they
Let
could-
me translate because he's
Fuck
obviously
me.
not listening to you. Maybe he will listen to me. What Vivian said was that they want to do this, but they are
Some
not
people want
doing
to,
this.
not
Yeah,
Israel
there are
as a
people
whole,
but
but
like
some
Ben
people,
Gvir that
yeah.
are shaping the policy, and this is what Vivian is saying. People like Ben
Mm-hmm.
Gvir who are shaping the policy want this to happen, but the reason that they don't is because it will affect their status in the region, because it will offend the powers which they rely on
Status
for the
in the
status in the
That's
region.
such an
Okay,
insane
status,
statement.
it's crazy. Status in the region. Can you name the countries that are pro-Israel in the Middle East?
Fucking basically done.
Okay, so then what the fuck are you talking about the status in the region?
Did I
They
say
have no
status in the
status in the
region? Shout at Wick.
They have no
Whatever fucking
status
word you
mandate.
use, okay?
Yeah, I was just
She
shouting.
said
I
we're
don't know who I was
dependent
shouting.
on support from many different
The
powers.
idea, like, they are not
Again, that
reliant
is
on the
a
Western
lie.
powers. So it's not about status in the West, okay? If you look at it's certainly not the UN, okay? The UN is going to hate them with or without anything that they do in the next 10 years, right? It is certainly not because they're concerned about
Oh yeah, no, the
status that they have in
UN.
Middle East.
I've heard this conspiracy theory before that the UN just has it out for Israel, which is why they keep saying Israel
Conspiracy.
commits
No,
war
no,
crimes.
No,
you're
she hasn't
so
been here
I've heard that.
before. We
misinformed.
substantiated this, I guess.
You did like zero research on this subject. Like it's apparent.
It's mind-boggling.
No. The UN are just
Audacity
the UN
to
are
be
just
able to
rad-
just, like,
It's
No,
so
no,
awkward.
no,
Vivian,
I
have you
I
joined White
understand.
Lots
The
with
UN
the
are just
Literally
rabid
literally less than 5
anti-Semites.
minutes. Focus,
true.
like,
The
warning
UN
about
are
this
just
topic
rabid
is
anti-Semites.
crazy.
Wait,
It's actually true. It's actually true.
Can you just
The
repeat
UN
what
is
we
the
talked about
is
before
the
Vivian
axis
came
of
here?
evil.
I wanna toss it.
Actually, did you know the UN
Now
was
you're
created by
stop it.
Hitler
I
to
wanna-
wipe out the Jews?
Hold
Did
on.
you know
Stop,
that?
stop.
Make
I
it
want to
look
toss it.
bad.
I want to toss it real quick. I want to toss it real quick to Rafi.
Hey,
Wait,
Oh my
I
God.
just want to bring it back. We got very sidetracked by whether Israel
I wanted
could
to
or
ask a
couldn't
question.
do this, right? Vivian, you said we are indiscriminately bombing, right? I just want to make sure that's your belief.
sure,
We
yeah.
are
Some
currently-
of the
Can you-
attacks
wait, stop.
by
I
Israel.
wanna go-
It's not what it looks like,
Can you
though.
define?
a
Can you
lie.
define for me what it means to indiscriminately bomb something? Like, what does that mean when you say it?
Sure. So, like, to bomb without due care, due care towards collateral damage, right?
Okay. So, and when you say
civilian
due
lives
care,
and so
due care
on.
towards collateral damage, let's just think hypothetically.
But it has to.
how many-
to be a
like-
proportionate response. It has to be. You have to minimize the amount of destruction that you.
That's fine. I would
Yes,
agree that we should
proportionate.
always
Like,
Yeah,
I'm
why
sorry.
do
I'm
people
sorry.
have
Who
to
did?
go
Who
and
does? Who
have
does
to do
Gal
the
who
same
says?
thing they did?
Yeah, it's the
Gal says
principle of
absolutely
the IDS to operate
nothing
under
useful at
Torah Neshek, which is the purity of arms. So absolutely, I agree with you that we don't want to be killing civilians. But I want to ask you now, if you're saying, okay, indiscriminate bombing, it means not taking due care. What do you see as due care? I mean, for each bomb, what number of civilians does each bomb killing? Do we consider that bomb to have been indiscriminately targeted?
I believe usually when it's like assessed, it depends on the importance of the military target and whether it's like like an essential military target, for example.
How do you classify an essential military target? I'm just curious, 'cause I spent 10 years. I spent 10 years in the military, so I'm just curious how you define an essential military target.
Yeah, fuck those. Like,
Okay, so I'm curious. Have you looked at the targets we've bombed in Gaza to see whether they were essential or not?
Yeah,
Have
I'm
you, like,
trying to bring.
personally-
I'm trying to bring up.
Right. So as an example, I believe at this point we've
Fucking
dropped
hell, dude.
around 7,000 munitions in Gaza. We've separately killed a little over 2,000 Hamas militants in direct gun battles. So that means we've killed a little bit over maybe 1.1 people for each bomb we've dropped. These are bombs that can bring down buildings. Okay. I'm just curious, like, to me, the conception of a bomb that can bring down a building only killing on average one person is such a high degree of precision and such a high degree of very careful targeting to avoid hitting civilians that I can't even imagine the frame of mind that you have to be in to call that indiscriminate.
So, sorry, you're saying
I'm saying we kill a single person with a bomb that brings down a building on average. How is that indiscriminate? How many people you understand, right? This is a dense.
And how
lot
many
of
people
live here.
How many people have? Yeah, it is. It's incredibly dense.
Yes, if we're killing,
one of the
bomb is bringing down a
most densely
building,
populated
it's killing
places on Earth. Yeah.
It's not. It's
that's also a
legit
myth,
not.
but that's
Stop.
fine.
It's
We don't even have to
also
go
a
over
lie.
that. But yeah,
I said
if a bomb.
I said one of the most densely populated places on Earth. How is that a lie?
It's 60
Okay.
second, to be clear. It's the 62nd
You
most
know
dense
what you
city
said.
on Earth.
You know
So,
why you
yeah.
said it. That it's just.
Okay, no, tell me, what did I say and why did I say it?
I don't want to get sidetracked off the bombing.
No,
because
because
Vivian,
this
if we kill, how many
You want to say? You know what you're implying.
Okay, we have to stop. This is why we have a moderator here. Gang, this is why we have a moderator here. I do want Viv to deal with Rafi first, and then we can go to Joe.
I'd love to be able to, but like people keep
you guys
popping in with the
keep
most
the
fucking
quips to a
stupid
minimum.
shit.
Keep the quips to a minimum while Rafi goes through this.
Okay, so let's refocus this, right? Again, Vivian, we're talking about munitions in the several several 100-kilo category that are bringing down buildings. Okay, these multi-story buildings. On average, we're killing slightly fractionally above one person with each of these bombs.
Sure, I'm trying to find the.
I'm just curious. Does that sound indiscriminate to you?
Sorry, can you repeat what you just said?
Does it sound indiscriminate for killing a single person each time we bring down a building?
One person each time you bring down a building?
Yes.
1.1, yeah.
I mean, if that's an average, I don't fucking know. I don't know how you're calculating that average.
I'm calculating that based on the number of bombs dropped and the number of people killed. It's like a pretty simple.
Okay, and every time you drop a bomb, you bring down a building?
More or less, yes.
I don't think that's the case, no.
Excuse me?
Okay,
I'm just curious.
Are
So
you serious?
is Gaza just totally fine then? Like, if we're not even bringing down the buildings, what are we even talking about? You think we're targeting single rooms in a building?
These aren't.
I mean, how many buildings did they hit in?
Around 6,000.
Flabbergasted. I'm gonna mute myself.
Yeah,
sorry.
We targeted around 6,000 to 7,000 buildings.
Can you just be the last one with Vivian? I think we've proven our point that she.
Okay. Then we'll just get to the next.
I wanted to ask a question.
I mean, I'm so. What I was trying to say earlier, right? Is I was trying to pull up
on your point.
Holy fucking
Okay, we gotta let Vivian finish. We gotta let Vivian finish. Vivian, just finish.
You specifically have said absolutely.
Okay, we don't need to.
Fucking
Okay, we don't need
so
to
shut
go
the
after.
fuck up.
We don't need to go after specific individual panelists. Vivian,
motherfucker, every single person is going specifically after me. All right, I'll go after whoever the fuck I want to. Now, listen. I was saying I was trying to bring up the specific examples that I had because we looked into them like a couple of weeks ago, right? And I kept getting fucking talked over when I was trying to make this point. We looked into them a couple of weeks ago when we had specific examples of how and when indiscriminate bombings occurred, right? There were examples such as like insufficient and confusing warnings being given to civilians such that meant that they returned to the places that they'd been warned about being bombed, right? Because Israel warned them that it was going to be bombed. They all moved out. It wasn't bombed for fucking ages. They went back to get a couple of things and then they all fucking die, right? Also, saying that they were going to hit specific houses and then hitting houses nearby, right? I mean, that seems pretty indiscriminate to me to start with.
I just want to make sure that to clarify.
But also,
you're equating indiscriminate with
also,
mistakes, right? You're saying that any mistake that we make is an indiscriminate bombing.
But also,
no.
Wait, can you just answer that question before we move forward?
Yeah, you're not going to answer.
Why? Why? Can I not?
I can't understand the frame of mind you have to be in to say that a mistake is the same as an indiscriminate bombing. Very clearly, we are being.
I don't know why you're saying this is a mistake.
You just gave us every example you gave us. The IAF.
How are you?
What makes you everyone in Gaza?
So
that's why.
And then finally, you have the example of them using munitions which are literally not discriminate, such as white phosphorus in Gaza, right?
You have
which
no
doesn't
idea how
kill,
that munition even works, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Okay.
It doesn't.
We do need to get to the next caller. Last point.
It doesn't immediately kill. It can result in organ failure.
I have no further points to make. I just want to.
What am I?
Stop!
This is fucking so stupid because I can't get a single fucking point out. You know what, Quibbles? It would fucking end if all of you could keep your fucking dicks in your pants for like 5 seconds instead of screaming like fucking idiots every time I say something.
Last statement.
What is fucking?
No, I will mute everyone else.
No.
Everyone else.
You know what? Because you're all such fucking children. Any single one of you want a fucking one-on-one about this with me? You're more than fucking welcome. We'll do it. A prepared fucking debate or whatever.
I will not.
Right? But me being able to get like 3 or 4 words out before you all start screaming. Everybody except Goat, by the way, because Goat is a fucking idiot. But like anyone else, feel fucking free. Hit me up, okay? But to finish the last point, white phosphorus does not instantly kill necessarily. Generally, it could do if you get like all over fucking body burns and it'd be fucking terrible. But usually it doesn't. It can kill through organ failure because of the phosphorus in the munitions that causes organ failure. But it is by nature indiscriminate when it is used in built-up civilian areas, right? And it is mainly used on battlefields for smoke cover. But it is not used for smoke cover when you're fucking dropping it on a built-up neighborhood.
Okay, Vivian, thank you for calling in. Thank you for calling in, and we will set up some one-on-ones for you. But for now, we got a line, so I'll see you later. Bye.
Wait, Wick, before we move forward, Rafi, do you want to just remind everyone what white phosphorus is actually being used for?
Yeah, I want to say 2 things. I want to, one, again, remind everyone that we don't use white phosphorus on people. We use it for its other utilities. I realized I said the wrong word in English previously. I apologize. My English is good, but I do sometimes mix up words. I said flare. I meant smoke screen. But the second, like, to create an obstacle in the path. The second thing, I just want the chat to recognize that Vivian isn't able, and people of her ilk and who support these positions are not able to defend a single accusation they make. So they always will rely on the worst possible extremes and then draw those into the average of activity.
Yeah,
so we need to be very clear that I don't think anyone here, I don't think anyone here will defend all of the IDF's actions. The IDF does make mistakes. There have been times where the IDF has done things that are not good and where innocent people have died that didn't need to die. That does not mean that on average the IDF is not an army that does our very best to protect the lives of the people in the areas in which we're operating.
Okay, any further thoughts before we bring in the next guest?
Yeah, I was just so I've heard this before, and it flabbergasts me every time. Like, anytime I hear information that comes out of Israel, I just totally write that off like it's bullshit. And I'm like,
apparently the IDF lies as much as Hamas. I don't know. That's it's holy shit.
Yeah. When this broke out, it was the same thing that 𝕵𝖎 said, and he's like, anytime something comes out of Israel, I take it like right from like it was from Russia, and I'm like, what the fuck are you saying?
I feel like their media operations throughout this entire conflict have been pretty unimpeachable. To be totally
It's-
honest.
they're
We
trying
made
to.
a
They
few
really are.
little
We have
errors,
independent
but the
media.
problem is that our media is run by like 18-year-old idiots that just got out of high school that got drafted.
I was going to
There's a
say,
big
like,
problem
the
that our media is
IDF's
run by actual idiots.
I want to say
Yeah,
the
the
IDF's
IDF
information warfare on this has been subpar. Like, I could
It's
do a better job.
blame is Gen Z and or I guess Israeli teenagers are really shitty at TikTok. I guess
TikTok
the one thing I
is
should
shit.
say. They're not doing well.
Is the accuracy. I was saying the accuracy, not necessarily
Oh,
the
sure.
methods. I think
Yeah,
they've
but the
generally
propaganda war is
they've
being
appeared
lost
to-
by Israel just straight up. It's just
But it
like-
doesn't mean
Well,
they're lying.
it's because you're fighting
Like-
against terrorists. Like, of course. Like, I mean, these people know what
I
they're
just wanna
doing. They've been doing this for 20 years.
Okay, next next
There's
caller.
a lot of the stuff that's coming out of. I mean, like
Hey, what's up?
Hamas literally has a wing that is literally responsible for statistics, and they're chronically lying about it. And that is literally what people like Hassan are literally using in order to try to make their
Literally lying.
bullshit about these kinds of things, like the attack that ended up not being an attack, ended up being an accidental rocket going off. That wasn't even from Hamas; it was from another terrorist organization in Gaza. Those kinds of things are different. When we're talking about both the UN and also the IDF and UN both obviously have a bias in this, obviously, but both of them, their statistics are accurate. Statistics being accurate and them having a bias in terms of how they're going to try to frame their views are different conversations. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. Continue.
Literally
what was the
lying.
call, Arnie?
I see
Oh, did I
Viv got
miss-
you guys
miss
going,
that?
huh?
Yeah, we knew it was
Viv
gonna happen.
triggered the ever living shit out of me. And I'm
You were the
furious
one
at
that asked
her,
for
and I
her,
look
sir.
forward- I know.
True.
I know.
True.
Just because she triggered me doesn't mean that I wasn't.
Well, you
I was
get what you
expecting her to
asked
trigger
for.
me. Doesn't mean that I don't want
Okay.
to argue.
But
with
I
her
want to give.
one-on-one in
We
the
got a
future.
line. We got a
Yeah,
line,
what's
and I
up,
want
Omni?
to. I want
She
to
just
respect everyone's
self-reported
time.
herself.
So we're gonna go to
Omni,
Omni's
what's up?
point. So Omni gets to ask his question.
All right.
What do you want?
Okay, so this could be a pretty short exchange or a longer one, depending on how you guys answer. So, I just have a couple of quick questions. So first one is, do you think there's any? Well, they're kind of the same, but do you think there's any connection at all between being Jewish and being Israeli, or being Jewish and being pro-Israel? And if so, if yes, why?
Being Jewish and being Israeli?
Not
Israeli is a nationality. Like, you're either Israeli because you're born there or you're not. Right?
I mean, we could. The thing about this question is that we could point to facts that contribute to yes or no, depending on what exactly you mean by that. Like, obviously, there's going to be a majority Jewish. There's majority Jewish citizens in Israel. Obviously, you have birthright citizenship if you're Jewish, or if you have parents or grandparents who are Jewish. But like, obviously, you could still be Jewish and not be Israeli, and obviously, you could still be Jewish and not be anti-Israeli. So like, it really depends on what you mean by that question.
Okay, so how about the pro-Israel part? Do any of you think that if you're Jewish and you're not pro-Israel, you're like anti-Israel, then you're not like a proper Jew or a true Jew or anything like that?
Pro-Israel, meaning
No.
Israel has the right to exist. What does it mean?
I wouldn't say anything
No,
about
not
proper
at all.
Jew, but if you, as a Jew, would say that you're like fundamentally anti-Zionist in the sense of supporting the dismantling of a Jewish state, I'd probably say that you probably have some ingrained like anti-Semitism. Yeah.
You're a Finkelstein.
Wait, even if you're Jewish?
Or
you'd
you're
say?
a
I think-
sect.
Okay,
Wait,
I think
wait,
you can
So
absolutely
my
be
answer
anti-Semitic
is-
and be Jewish. There's
No,
no
this is absolutely
incompatibility.
incorrect. This is absolutely
Sorry, if
incorrect.
you support the
can
fundamental
be,
dismantling and like ethnic cleansing of Jews from
You
Israel,
could be a part of a sect that's
be
like against getting a country like.
yeah, I'm not saying you're
having
not a Jew. I'm just
any
saying
I don't
that
country.
think
there's some
Terry
anti-Semitism
Carta
there.
is not Jewish, and I don't
Hmm.
think that they're anti-Semitic by definition in and of itself
I
because
wouldn't say
they are
that's anti-Semitic.
anti-Zionist.
Yeah.
What I
Right.
would say,
Yeah, that's what I was
is that-
thinking. Yeah.
What I would say is that when you are a minority within a minority, as anti-Zionist Jews are, that there are certain obligations that come with that. And one of the obligations that comes with it is an obligation to recognize that yours is not the majority position of Jews as a whole. And so therefore, you have an obligation to be super vigilant and super conscious of the fact that many people who are genuinely both anti-Zionist and also anti-Semitic are going to use you as a cudgel against Jewry as a whole.
Sure.
And so you have an obligation to be very, very vigilant about that. But no, in and of itself,
Token.
being anti-Zionist does not definitionally make you an anti-Semite.
Okay, all right.
Or a fake Jew,
Wait.
or whatever
Yeah, I disagree, but that's
that
okay.
accusation was.
Wait, so you I'm sorry, I missed what you just said, Quibbles. Wait, you said that being anti-Israel or anti-Zionist is the minority position of Jews?
It's the minority position of Jews to be anti-Israel, but it doesn't mean that they are bad
Wait,
Jews.
is that backed up with facts and like actual
Yeah.
data though?
Yeah, it is.
Like,
would
like
overwhelming
literally,
majority
like
of
so, like
Jews are
literally, we're
pro-Israel.
talking like Jewish people across all like countries or
Yeah. Well, I
or-
mean,
or
like
whatever?
half of all Jews worldwide live in Israel, so obviously those are generally pro-Israel. But even in terms of American Jews, which is the second largest population of Jews, yeah, we are overwhelmingly pro-Israel. We're also overwhelmingly Democrats, but yeah, we're overwhelmingly Israel.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't look at those.
But again,
statistics,
that doesn't mean that we're all. And
Yeah, there is
part of the issue. I'm
One-
actually going to
yeah, one of
go
the-
into this in a lot of detail in my video essay that's going to come out tomorrow. Part of the issue that we have to grapple with as Jews is like, it's a real issue when Jewish organizations explicitly start to frame themselves as being Zionist, because there's Judaism is a lot more than just about an issue of politics, particularly this individual case of politics, but politics more generally. We are a lot more deep and a lot more important than that. And I think that we debase ourselves when we make ourselves one and the same.
I did want to
with
ask about
Zionism.
this. I did want to ask about this, and
Mhm.
excuse me for this interrupting this question, but it is curious to me because I've seen a lot of people, right? A great many people, especially online, that will point to organizations such as the Jewish Voices for Peace, right, and say
Yep.
these are what Jews outside of Israel think, and these are what they represent, and it feels very. I guess my question is, what do you all think of that, right? When you hear people that will point to these minority organizations, like the minority of minority organizations, and say,
Mhm.
this is representative, these are the good ones, right? These are the good Jews. What do you think? How does that make you feel? What's your
insulting.
thoughts?
Yeah, it's insulting. It is. And I think that the problem is that, like, I want to parse out the difference between that minority within the minority and the people who are trying to use that minority within the minority as a cudgel against the rest of Jews, right? So, like, being a Jew Voice for Peace member, Jewish Voices for Peace member, that in and of itself is something that, like, there are no Jews who aren't affected by the Israel-Palestine struggle, but there are many who come to conclusions that are different than my own, even if they're a minority. And yet I don't think that that's the same as allowing yourself to be used as that cudgel. And I think that some, Norman Finkelstein, I think is an example of this, do allow themselves to be used as that cudgel in ways that I think are not itself anti-Semitic, but permitting themselves to be wielded by anti-Semites against Israel, but by an extension against Jews as well.
Yeah,
You don't
I think I
Finkelstein-
strongly
you-
disagree.
oh,
I mean, I think these people,
never
not
mind.
only are they're not allowing themselves to be used, right? They are a cudgel themselves, and they are like taking advantage of the fact that there are other organizations that will magnify and spread their views and doing it purposefully. I absolutely think that Jews who engage in like I'm not talking about people who criticize the state of Israel, right? I want to be very clear. I'm talking about Jews who say that like all Jews should be removed from the state of Israel. Any Jew who says that, like, they're still Jewish, but I mean, they are fundamentally calling for like the killing and murder and rape and like expulsion of their own people. I mean, there's no like shifting that or hiding that or obfuscating that, right? That is what they're doing. So I think there is a lot, especially because of the way that especially academia and just generally the left operates. To be a Jew in these spaces often means you must take that kind of an extreme position. And so whether they're being forced to or not, it doesn't really matter to me. At the end of the day, these are not hapless fools. You know, they have autonomy. They have the ability to make their own decisions, and they're making decisions that actively harm Jews. And if we can't call that
hold
anti-Semitic,
on.
I don't know
You
what
think
we
that
can.
being you think that being in academia makes you be
No. Calling for the destruction of the state of Israel makes you you're calling for genocide. I mean, fundamentally, that's what you're doing.
Yeah,
You said something about being in academia.
I said, yeah.
That's not
The
a
way that
must.
the leftist movement works and academia also is that in order to exist in these spaces as a Jew, you are very often litmus tested on your positions on Israel.
Tested. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if
but
you don't have
I think it can go.
properly-
I think it goes the opposite direction a lot of the time as well, though. Like, right? Like, it depending on what like department and stuff you're in. Like, you probably goes the other way around. Like, well, you have to be like pro-Israel, otherwise you could like face consequences.
Which department in academia do you think that you will be kicked out of if you are not pro-Israel?
I don't know. But well, okay. So I'm thinking more like the more conservative ones, like maybe economics, for example. Like,
I mean, I think even economics now in the
I
U.S.
think
is
that's
pretty
accurate.
far
What I
left.
will say,
Agreed.
what I will say is that the BDS movement has explicitly attempted and sometimes succeeded.
BDS
My
meaning
sister,
Boycott, divest, and
sanction,
sanction.
sorry. So the boycott, divest, sanction movement, which has been very successful in Europe and somewhat successful in the United States, has explicitly attempted and succeeded. In the case of a place like Edinburgh, where my older sister used to go to school, and was a Jewish leader. When she was a student, there was a vote that made it so that no Israeli scholars were permitted on campus, were permitted to work on Edinburgh's college campus and to be faculty members there. And the goal of that is to be anti-Zionist. But the truth is that when you're talking about the most successful Jewish scholars of Jewish history, of Holocaust history, of the history of anti-Semitism, all of that, obviously a very large proportion of them end up going to study in Israel for a period of time, end up working on Israeli campuses, all of that. And so the result of that is you end up in terms of actual practical implications, barring the overwhelming majority of Jewish scholars in a way that I think is really dangerous. So I think that's a little bit different than explicitly barring Jews. It's better than barring Jews, but you sort of get to the same kind of conclusion in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
Last
That's
point, because we
bullshit
do
when
have a
they do
line,
that. Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
There is a line,
agree
but-
with I agree with what you said, and it kind of connects to my whole question here because I think it's fucking stupid when people ask these questions of Jewish people, expecting a certain answer just because they're Jewish. Because my answer to my own question earlier is that there is no real necessary connection between being Jewish and being Israeli or even pro-Israeli, because
I think
and
there's
it's
a
kind of
necessary
racist or
connection.
anti-Semitic to say that.
Yeah, I want to clarify. I think that there's a necessary connection. I just don't think that connection guarantees that you're going to end up being pro-Israel or Zionist. But it does guarantee that you are going to have grounds to care about this particular conflict in a way that you don't necessarily care about other conflicts, if that makes sense. So
Which
there's
is
a
also no
proximity
different.
component
It's no different
that
than like
is the
any
result of
other
being
group
Jewish.
with their connection to their.
I'm not even sure if I necessarily agree with that though. Why do they have to care more about it?
Omni, thank
Well,
you
because
for
there's just a
coming.
proximity.
Thank you for
If
coming.
you're
We can
Jewish,
spend like an
2,000 years
hour on
ago-
this alone, but I
Yeah.
do want to respect people's time, and I want to respect my time. So we're gonna get through this list, and then we're gonna call it for the night.
Okay, that's fine.
Omni,
Thanks for having
thank
me.
you. No problem. People's Elbow, you're live. Beautiful.
People's Elbow is no longer
Fuck
alive.
'em.
One more time. One more time. Try. Oh, no. Well, okay. Next caller. Infallible. What you got?
What's up, Infallible?
Well, I wish I was coming in at a happier time. Actually, when we first entered the panel, it was actually we were getting some progress and talking about some of the actual issues instead of finger pointing. And then Quibbles did his shill, and now we're on finger pointing. But what I really wanted to get at is we're looking at things a lot from the perspective of an Israeli citizen and what we want the other side to do. But I wanted to actually wonder what you guys think as a Palestinian citizen. I know Goat talked about having a fear of anti-Semitism, hate crimes, and everything like that. And I know it's not the exact same thing as a hate crime, but if you fear Hamas, I think it's fair to say some of the citizens of Palestine probably fear Hamas too. Exactly.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wait, what's the question?
I don't even think there's a question. Is there any question?
Really,
That's 100% true.
how do we get to any change in Israel or in Palestine without protecting the citizens of Palestine?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we got
the
rid of
way
Hamas.
to protect them.
yes.
Dismantle Hamas.
Yeah, the only way to protect them is to dismantle Hamas. And then once you've dismantled Hamas, there has to be, because I don't think that protection is the only thing that's relevant. I also think that freedom is important. And
Yeah.
getting to that freedom
Education.
and justice requires not just that first you dismantle Hamas, but that second you also take this really difficult step of trying to figure out a way to get towards a trajectory towards a real peace and a lasting peace, which is going to require democracy in both Gaza as an independent country, as well as the West Bank as an independent country. I should clarify, the majority of the West Bank, not the totality, because the parts that are very close to the border should probably be folded into Israel.
I don't want to segue too much, but you talk a lot about democracy. I don't know that democracy actually is the best fit for the Palestinian society. There are a lot of researchers. It's very interesting. They've talked more about emirate setups for the
I'd be
because
very
democracy is
curious
not
to
like
have a.
really
I mean, it's
endemic
not
to the
only
Middle
about the
East.
Palestinians. It's a.
I'd be
all
very
of us.
interesting, Rafi. If
No, I
you
understand,
wanted to.
but I'm saying democracy is not really like an endemic system of governance here, and the most successful states here actually tend to be like emirate based. So I
If
can't
you
remember
wanted
his
to
name.
do,
A friend of mine recently sent me the work of a historian, or not a historian. I think he like a sociologist in Israel who has been looking at this issue, and he's recommended I think like a 10-state solution basically in Judea and Samaria that would involve like 10 different separate emirates.
Oh,
There's actually
I
some
heard
very
If you
about
interesting
wanted
like
that.
non-democratic
That's an
approaches
interesting take.
to this.
Sure.
What
If
if
you
And that are
wanted
much
to,
more based on like their culture and the way that their society even currently functions.
if you wanted to build that out more in depth, I'd be curious to talk to you. Maybe
I'm willing
one-on-one
to be the
at a
idiot
later
here.
point.
What's an emirate?
It's like the
It's
UAE,
functionally a
United Arab
tribal-based
Oh,
system,
okay,
right? So
gotcha.
you'll have individual tribes that have control over some specific domain,
Gotcha.
and then they work together to form like
Yeah,
the
I'd be
United
curious to
Arab
see.
Emirates, for instance, right? It's a bunch of
I'd be
individual
curious to
emirates.
see you flesh that out, just because there's a lot of callers. I don't want to take up too much time of the panel, but I would be curious if you wanted to do that one-on-one.
Yeah, sorry, because I'm sorry that I just you kept saying democracy,
It's okay.
and I started to feel like
I want to.
Sure,
Yeah, I want to.
think
I
It is
get it. I get it.
interesting,
I
though,
get
so
it. I get
thank
it.
you for
But
coming.
It's an interesting conversation, but I don't want to have it now.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
Foul. Did you have anything else you wanted to push back on or ask or anything else of him?
No, not really. I could push back on the whole, leftist thing, but it seems like it was already covered by Vivian and a lot of all that.
Thank you. Thank you for calling in.
And seeing some kind of talk towards empathy. We're not going to actually come to a solution of peace without empathy.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to give orders to each other, like, you guys overthrow your government, you guys hold elections, get rid of Hamas, and it's like, is it that easy? No, it's really not, but...
Okay.
We have to do it.
Well, thank you for calling in, sir.
All right.
Bye. We'll try elbows one more time, and if he doesn't work, then we'll go off and we'll probably call it a night. People's elbow. Your time to shine.
Woo!
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. What you got?
We can hear you.
No. You guys are all based, and I appreciate you guys being on panel. It seems like at the root of all these condemnations and criticisms of Israel, these talking points about open-air prison, genocide, ethnic cleansing, apartheid state, white
Other
phosphorus,
words that people don't know what they mean.
all of these things exist as condemnations only because they serve one interest, and that's to delegitimize the very existence of the state of Israel. These are false claims. These are claims that are intended to undermine the sovereignty, the legitimacy of the state of Israel. And because, as we could tell with Vivian, as soon as we work down and get down one or two levels, the talking point evaporates, and you can eviscerate it quickly. For example, the indiscriminate thing, right? Vivian wants to, as so many of her pals, want to pretend that Israel's carpet bombing Gaza right now, indiscriminately bombing. And the problem with that is that we see indiscriminate bombing in this geographic region. It is only happening from one direction. When you launch tens and tens and tens of thousands of unguided rockets intentionally into Israel to intentionally kill as many civilians as possible, that is indiscriminate. And that Viv and her allies and pals can't figure this out just demonstrates that, again, they don't have a problem with war crimes. They don't have a problem with indiscriminate killing.
Elbow, can I tell you something? I think...
Hold on a sec. They only have a problem when Israel defends herself. That's it.
Yep.
That's the problem.
Mono,
I agree,
go
but
ahead.
I'll also add, because even if Hamas had the technology to use like guided missiles to target specific places, they wouldn't.
I mean, we know where they would be guided.
Just real quick, Short Fat Otaku, thank you for the raid. Welcome to the stream. We are having a Jewish Voices panel, and we are having the segment right now. # Ask a Jew. So if you or your people want to come on and ask a Jew,
Ask a Jew.
These are Jewish voices that also happen to want peace.
We're Jewish voices, but not peace.
What I wanted to say though is Hamas will always use the indiscriminate method, even if they had the ability to use like targeted missiles, most high precision weapons, because it wouldn't
because the only
you know what I mean. I'm sorry.
Kill as many Israelis
Language
as
barrier.
possible. That's it. That's the only reason. They're not fighting a resistance. They're not. This isn't armed resistance as most Palestinians by and large support and affirm. However, it is to intentionally kill as many Israelis as possible, even if that includes their fellow Palestinians and their fellow Muslims. That's the whole point.
Yeah, and what I wanted to say is that even if it's not a problem of resources. Like even if they had all the resources in the world, they will always use the same tactic.
Okay.
Well, how many billions of dollars do the
Yeah.
Palestinians need for
Let's do less
education,
circle jerk. I'm
healthcare,
interested
food?
in more contentious questions.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, People's Elbow,
all
thanks for
right.
coming on.
You bet.
Fair enough.
Take care,
People's
guys.
Elbow, you're
See
super
you.
based. I love you.
Okay.
Can I explain? Can I
Guys.
ask? Or can I ask a contentious question?
I'm ready for your contentious question.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
for it.
Well, I'm gonna phrase it particularly inflammatory. So when Hassan was talking to Ethan and they were talking about the from the river to the sea stuff, right? And Hassan asked Ethan, are Jewish Voice for Peace people, and if not now people, are they considered capos? Would you consider them capos? Do you guys think that they are capos?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't mean to load in this. They're not actively killing Jews, but they are actively.
They're advocating for something that
participating in the
both of
process.
us would probably agree would lead to.
We can
genocide,
separate, right?
right?
Because capos actively harmed Jews, right? Like they directly did the harm themselves. Yeah, but we can say that here they're not directly doing the harm, but they're participating in the process in a
They're
very
just
definitive and very
radicals.
obvious
Yes.
way. So I think that I personally wouldn't
What
call
about
them
that?
capos, right? Because I think that gets into the
Yeah.
same issue of like apartheid. We're using
It's
a
not
word
quite what
that
Ethan
has
said.
moral loading to make people
I don't
feel
think we're
some
being-
certain way about it. But do I think that it's
we're
like
being-
generally accurate? Yeah, kind of.
I don't think we're being quite fair to Ethan, just to clarify what Ethan actually said. Ethan said that Hassan was pointing to those individual Jews as a way of trying to cop out of
Tokenizing.
the
Oh
broad
yeah.
problem.
No, I agree.
He was
No, I
tokenizing
know.
in a way that I think was really dangerous. And so I
Yeah.
think that what Ethan said was approximately, I don't remember the word for it, but basically what he was saying was, look, there are obviously going to be minorities within the minority who are willing to tokenize themselves in ways that are
Yeah.
horrible, right? And so the capos equivalent, he
everywhere.
could also just as easily have said like, oh, like there are individual black people who say absolutely
Support the
atrocious, horrible
KKK.
things in support of the KKK, absolutely atrocious things
Yeah.
in support of any number of horrible, vile, despicable things that are obviously racist. That's
Yeah,
that's
and
the
that
point
does
he was
not
making.
represent the
Yeah, no,
whole.
it's like when people
It
call
wasn't
Candace
literally
Owens.
one-to-one calling them
No, I know.
capos.
It's like when people call Candace Owens like an Uncle Tom or something like that, right?
Yeah, I would definitely not do that, and I would definitely not do that.
Careful.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
would
I wasn't sure if
definitely
that term was TOS. I actually wasn't sure. Okay.
And not even TOS. I just don't.
It's not.
I'm
I
not
don't want to
comfortable
go down
using
this line, right?
Oh
I'm not
yeah,
comfortable
no, I
using
know.
it,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unless we have another caller in the next 30 seconds. I want to thank everyone for coming out. I want to thank everyone for being willing to have this conversation. I know that there are a lot of people who are in my community who are like, why are we having another talk about this? Oh, this is boring. Maybe to you, but I'm very passionate about this subject. It's an ongoing thing. I think that these Jewish voices have been, at least in my section of the internet, suppressed in a very, unless they are anti-Israel, then they've been signal boosted to the moon. But other normie Jewish voices just again have been oppressed or have been just used as pawns to fight each other. And I wanted to have a panel where they would have a chance to discuss and even argue amongst themselves about some of the things going on. Gang, if you enjoy my content, if you want to see more of it, there's several ways you can support the channel. You can like or subscribe if you're on YouTube, if you're on Twitch, or if you're on Kick, you can hit that follow button. Those are free. If you want to give me money, which is helpful, you can, again, gift subs in my Twitch chat or my Kick chat. You can also super chat to ask questions and to make comments, or just a thank you sticker, right? You can do those too. Always to help me out. Okay, tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have Oleg on, and apparently Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have Vivian Wolf versus 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙, and they will be a one-on-one conversation on a topic of their choosing. Should be interesting. Tune in. Why does Twitch TV hate me? Thank you for the gifted tier 1 sub. Really appreciate you. Okay, and with that, we're going to raid out, and we're going to raid out into Mooncake.
By the way,
because we want to get her affiliated. Any
By the
further
way,
comments before we go? Yeah.
I was gonna say if you should definitely do a Palestine panel if you can, and then
Oh,
maybe
absolutely.
pick a few people from both sides and see if you can do a civil panel
100%.
after that.
I could
Oh,
do a
yeah.
civil panel. The only problem is last time I put Palestinian voices and Jewish voices together, one of the Palestinian voices broke toss and said that anyone fleeing Gaza who is Palestinian is a traitor and should be shot in the head. And so we had to end
I
that.
see. Okay. All right, less than
Might
Yeah.
filter a bit.
But
That
okay.
was
I just want to say
content. Wick,
thanks
you
again.
it was content still.
I guess. But for now, we're gonna raid out. Make sure you let Mooncake know that this is a hate raid. Spam those emotes. She's trying to get affiliate. We'll try to help her get affiliate. So watch her for a little bit, get her numbers up, give her a follow, and see you guys later. Bye.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Appreciate it.